Someone once said that even the smallest axe can cut down a tree. It's true, it's not always about ratio. Drops of water falling continuously for many years will eventually one day make a hole in the stone, and after all the effort put in, will experience joy. If you keep knocking, the door will definitely open. This is also one of the rules of life: you can't give up. A beautiful child with snow-white hair knocks, calling for her father. She knows perfectly well that her father is nearby. The main character's name is Evriel Solgren. Realizing that there was no answer, the little girl frowned. If only she were taller, she would have reached that door handle without any problems. Everything is annoying, because it is not clear why it was necessary to return to such an early age. This is not what was supposed to happen, holding out her hand. The child asks if they can hear her voice. The Duke must open, maybe he is just afraid, that is why he hid. But nothing terrible will happen. If the man gets out of bed, Evri will not die in agony. She wants to survive and wants to be close to him in this wonderful estate. The Duchess was sleeping. She was dreaming 10 times and was snoring with pleasure when the door opened and a rough voice asked the girl to get up. A red-haired guy appeared in the doorway, with a lantern illuminating the room with a weak light. This man was none other than the crown prince of the Velroyten Empire, Tyrant Casviter Valnerion. The man comes closer and helps the blonde to get up. He calmly says that the girl should leave the palace now before it is too late. Without explaining anything, Tyrant throws a cloak over the girl's shoulders and takes her outside. She feels fear. It's scary to imagine what will happen next, whether the hero will throw her into the fountain or lock her in the closet again. Moving forward without stopping, the heroine suddenly understands where she will be taken. To the side is the prayer house of the imperial palace. Entering inside, the red-haired man freezes and does not turn around. He will only tell you once, so it is better to remain silent. There is a secret passage under the organ bench after the lady enters. You must go straight ahead without turning in order to leave the palace before dawn. The blonde tries to stay calm, but it turns out very badly. She asks why it was necessary to leave the palace at all. If the beauty does not follow the instructions, she will die soon, and nothing will help her. The words sent a slight chill down her spine. 2 weeks ago, the Eastern Curtain fell. Duke Solgren was unable to stop the evil that had broken out. The soldiers did not help him. As a result of what happened, a good part of the Northern Territory simply rotted, which meant only one thing. Rotten ones are the demonic beasts that are products of darkness. They are terrible in any manifestation. When attempting to cleanse the land, engulfed in darkness, poison is released, the toxins of which kill plants and herbivores. Who eat them die. Then come predators, and then people. Evriel, without slowing down, follows the man, and along the way, asks if her father is okay. As it turns out, contact with him was lost a long time ago. There should be a lot of soldiers in the north, but they weren't even sent there from the beginning. The imperial family plans to abandon the north before it's too late. After what happened, the emperor has no other option but to punish the Solgren family for failing to preserve the land. The rot is just a pretext. Evri understands this better than anyone else. The man wants to use this opportunity to remove the Duke looming before his eyes. When the current king ascended to the throne, there was a massive purge. And of course, the only one left alive was Herwin Solgren. The reason he escaped death is obvious because he is a member of the imperial family. The families of the first emperor and the keeper of the veil, Solgren, founded Velroyten, and also swore an oath by the name of Shea, the so-called protection from the curse. The family is the emperor's honorary subjects. No one has the right to spill each other's blood without completing the deal. There is only one condition under which an oath can be broken, and that is failure to fulfill the mission as a vassal. Of course, the emperor will not miss the chance to get rid of Herwin, who is clearly in his way. The only thing the heroine does not understand is why Tyrant is helping her. The red-haired man calmly says that he never hated the beauty, and therefore decided to help the little girl, does not understand how this is possible. Entering inside, the couple looks around. Strange sensations do not leave the body. It seems, or the statue of the goddess Shea smiles a nasty smile. An ominous voice is heard, asking if the two have come simply to pray, or if there is something else going on. His Majesty smiles. The Duchess obediently came to the strange place, simply believing in the words of his son, and without even thinking. Tyrant pushes the beauty away, challenging the man where he saw his son for now. That's all he can answer. The heir shouts at his father to shut up, but he becomes even more frightening. It is obvious that the man still hasn't played enough with his doll. The young man watches as the man is enveloped in a vapor of smoke, some dark substance that does not resemble anything familiar. The Duchess is enveloped in the same thing, making it so that she has no right to move in any direction. The prince screams, but his words are scattered. It's been 5 years since Evriel arrived at the imperial palace. After the words, the hero takes out his sword. The son seems to be losing his mind due to the fear he is experiencing. He begs for it to stop before it is too late. It's time to send the baby to the emperor's younger brother. She wants to cry because she doesn't want to die. Nothing bad has been done. In any case, the lady will not be too lonely, because her father is already waiting on the other side after he was killed in the same way as her. After the blow, the beauty falls unconscious to the ground. There are splashes of blood around, but there is no scream because everything happened too quickly. The heroine will die, after all. She already understood that there will be no salvation. Sadly looking at the goddess, Shea Evri still does not understand why she is smiling. It seems that no one feels sorry for the poor child. If Solgren had a little more strength, this would never have happened. He was just sick, so he did nothing. Eyes open, Evriel hears a familiar voice that makes his whole body shudder. The blonde calmly asks what the beauty forgot in his office. He can't believe that his father is alive. It's all like a dream from which he will have to wake up any minute. The baby starts to cry. It seems to her that she was allowed to say goodbye to a person before death. It is like a gift from fate. Solgren understands that he did something wrong, so he calmly asks if his words scared his daughter. The girl rushes to hug him, asking what she should do if he dies. This hasn't happened yet. They haven't seen each other for so long that the beauty misses him. It seems that the girl came again because of the teacher, whatever the case. But this is not how to behave. She needs to try to improve. Now the lady most of all needs a governess who will help with her studies and do everything as it should be. It seems that father already said something similar, but in a past life, Lady Tillian will soon arrive at the castle. It is imperative to get along with her. The little girl remembers every word, and therefore finishes the sentence for her father. If they don't get along, it will be hard to find a teacher again, and a decent amount of time will have to be spent on it. The gaze turns to the Solgren deer, hanging on the wall. Now there is no doubt the beauty is definitely in the estate, and in the man's room. Someone enters the room immediately after the knock. The fair-haired girl asks for forgiveness for disturbing. As it turns out, she came for the mistress. When Ivry was 6 years old, her maid returned to her home so that her body would not be taken over by the rot from the north. Why does it seem in my head that this is the afterlife which makes me feel uneasy? The master orders to take his daughter back to her room. The little girl is stubborn. She doesn't agree with where she's being sent, because there's still something very important that needs to be checked. Lily still carries the beauty out the door. She quietly asks why Uriel ran away while she was preparing a bath for her. Belgren calmly asks the little girl if she is upset that the teacher is coming soon, and she hangs her head. The Duke had a hard time hiring Madame, one has to agree, but the girl had already been through this. Calmly carrying the lady into the room, the lady asks, "Not to worry, the teacher will probably be good." There is a snowball on the table, a toy given to Lily on her 5th birthday. The blonde can't believe it. She's being called to take a bath. It's high time, but for some reason, the beauty is trying to run away. There are too many contradictions in her head. The little girl grabs her face, looking at it in surprise, and not understanding if it's really her. The maid smiles, saying that it is the child's birthday today. She congratulates again, holding out her hands in a gesture. Solgren screamed and thrashed in confusion. But unfortunately, there was nothing left. She was sent to the bathroom. Something on her shoulder catches her eye. This scar wasn't there before the cut is exactly where she was hit. The wound must have been deep, which means it was quite painful. The heroine does not respond. The Emperor's sword was terribly painful. The little girl was scared that day, and everything was swimming before her eyes as if underwater. I would like to tell the truth, but this is already a different level. I will have to explain that the beauty went back in time. No matter how much Solgren thinks she does not understand why she returned to the past, if this is so, it is worth thinking about. When the main character turns 14, the king will destroy her entire family and the girl herself. Perhaps the child was given another chance by the goddess herself. She will be able to change the future. The lady is glowing with joy. But it fades away. She is only 5, and it is not clear what can be done at such an age. It is necessary for the father to restore power and return his former strength, in which case the story will end happily. Everything is correct, and the plan is perfect. But the only problem is the father weakened by illness. The reason why their family has no support is because of Hervin's health, which is gradually deteriorating. The shining sky at the mountain peaks is called a curtain, and it is not a simple weather phenomenon, but something more. The mountain ranges contain darkness, with powerful demons sealed within them. The veil is the only defense against these creatures. Solgrins who fail to maintain the veil will have to pay the penalty if things go wrong. Perhaps the emperor himself deliberately ruined everything since it was more than beneficial to him. The little girl knows that she must never give in to helplessness. The duke must regain his former power. From this point on, the main goal is to restore health, and preferably as quickly as possible. The beauty is asked to sit down at the table to eat. The food is somehow meager. Hervin probably eats exactly the same. There is little on the table, but the cook tried very hard, smiling the little girl. Thanks, Alex, so as not to offend. It's not a question of the chef's competence. The financial situation is so bad that even the food budget has to be cut. The mistress blows out the candles, and the servants clap for her, while she will simply enjoy such pleasant moments. They are special. If the holiday always falls in October, it means that it is now this month the girl tries to count. Around this time, the young lady followed Tillienne to the palace, and earlier that day, her father reminded her about the teacher. Dad doesn't understand anything at all, because his daughter only needs him and no one else. Under no circumstances should the teacher be allowed into the mansion, or if necessary, he should be escorted out as quickly as possible. Lily, as the mistress's nanny, will always be on her side. Nothing will change. If everything is so, the heroine promises to listen to the request, no matter what it is, about the beauty smiles. The hero feels ill again and is about to call a doctor, but then a rag in cold water hits his face. The man sees his daughter, and it seems to him that this is all a strange dream that he is having because of the heat. It quickly dawns on him that what is happening is quite real, and Solgren greets Hervin. Lily remained behind the door, waiting to be called inside, and then she entered. Blue-Eyed insists that she did not open the door, or rather, she did not do it herself without listening to anyone. The beauty merely lifted the lady so that she could reach the door handle. The blonde used manipulation, saying that if she was not helped, she would not eat. The man orders her to take the towels and leave, but the daughter resists with all her might. Entering the room without permission is prohibited, and it seems the beauty has long since realized this. Evriel had never been so capricious, but recently she had noticeably changed. In her hands was a snowball toy, which the girl had forgotten on the chair next to the bed. It turns out that Lily herself made the thing, but the baby was sad in the room, so they brought him to the Duke. A doll in the hands of an adult sounds like a real joke, which gave me a strange feeling. The girl again wanted to talk about the teacher, but she was again reminded that it was better not to go into the bedroom. The lady screamed and sobbed. If she didn't do just that, she would stop seeing Hervin. I always wanted a man to at least talk a little to give me his love. In fact, this outcome of events was quite expected. The father is too strict, so it seems there are few options left. The lady can't help but be upset. She was just trying to be as caring as possible. At first, the little girl wanted to talk about the teacher, but when she saw Hervin lying in bed, she couldn't even open her mouth. You can tell from his face that he will soon get even worse or disappear completely. Lying in a dark room all alone, the guy is bored, which is why the Duchess wanted to be near. This won't do. There must definitely be a way. The beauty tells Belgrin that she is going to go somewhere. The baby went to the family doctor, Evan Chrysler. He asks if everything is okay or not. To take good care of the Duke, you need to know every one of his illnesses well. The man looks like a charlatan. Of course, he has a medical license, but the question is in the man himself. Hundreds of women fell for the guy's tricks and then ran away from the mansion in tears. The child can examine the medicines, but Evan doubts there will be anything interesting in them. The ingredients for the drink my father needs are laid out on the table. It will take about 3 days to make. Smiling, the beauty tries to dilute the conversation so that she can later ask the doctor what illness her father has. It was unexpected that the daughter was interested in Hervin's condition. It was strange that it began to bother her at all. The man's gaze becomes stern in just a second, and he looks at his interlocutor. Of course, all this is necessary just to find out more, perhaps even to be able to help. In fact, not much is known about the Duke's illness, and it is not clear what to do about it at all. Only Evan himself and assistant Keon, his closest confidants, know the truth about the master's condition. Even servants are strictly forbidden to know the details because they seem completely unworthy of it. All the man says is that the guy's lungs are weakening, so it's much harder for him than for everyone else. The blonde still wants to know what she should do to make her dad get better. If she sleeps and eats, she hopes that everything will go away. In good weather, the hero would benefit from walks in the fresh air only with his daughter. The heroine's good intentions will definitely help. In any case, everything will be more than good. Hervin's current condition is beyond the doctor's control, and he understands that he can do nothing. Hugging Evan, the girl thanks him and says that she is now much less worried. Lily, using only gestures, tells the brunette that she is glad that he managed to cheer up the little girl. In fact, the little girl hides her true feelings. She is afraid that Solgren has developed Cynic's disease, an incurable disease gradually reduces the functions of the heart for reasons unknown to mankind. There will definitely be a cure for this terrible infection, but they are only just beginning to develop it now. When the main character was 13, they finally found a way to slow down the effects of the disease. Sunlight helped, and then a year later, they developed a real cure. Evan's voice echoes in my head, talking about how the master's lungs are weakening. Looking at the table, the beauty realized that there were only sleeping pills and painkillers there. Studying the herbs in the Imperial Library will be useful. It is worth thinking about what to do next. In her past life, even after the invention of the medicine began, the girl could not run to her father. She felt bad about the possibility of being rejected again. Now is not the time for stupid memories. Such a thing will not happen. Then the man will live happily and long. In order to help the baby, must quietly sneak into the room like a mouse into a hole. Lily asks, not to worry, the Duke will definitely recover someday. The heroine heard somewhere that it is easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. She had something in mind. The next day, a servant was ordered to throw out the curtains from the Duke's room to let in the sun. The guy always kicks them out, so this time most likely nothing will change, at least not too much. The door was locked, and the little girl jumped out, realizing that she didn't deserve this. To be heard, the beauty screams as loudly as possible, something about caring, and that she wanted the best. The Duke listens to the screams. The girl had never been so stubborn, but now she decided to get out of the rut. The blonde doesn't understand whether it's worth continuing to force the child to do something she doesn't really want to do. Falling onto the bed, the hero coughs up blood. It gets worse and worse. Every must not be allowed near him under any circumstances. The lady was tired of shouting. She drooped. It was unclear why the father closed himself off, as if he was really angry. Even when Hervin swears he doesn't close down, it's scary to think that the symptoms have worsened, and this is the real reason. The hand trembles as the little girl tries to knock again and ask permission to go inside. The gentleman clearly needs a rest. Belgren offers to go back and even promises to bring dessert. Every will remain at the door. The most important thing is her father, not some food, which is completely unimportant to her. The door opened, but on the threshold appeared none other than Rasher, who greeted Ivriel. The Meyer family, who had served the Solgrens for generations, was exiled, so the man who took the place of assistant is Keon. In words, the guy is a simple assistant, but in reality, he has taken on all the responsibilities of his sick father. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, although it seemed like the separation hadn't lasted that long. The gentleman needs rest. It is clear that the girl is bored, but today is definitely not the best day for a meeting. Making cute eyes, the blonde asks to come in for just a second. She needs to pass on something very important. Lately, the gentleman had been sleeping little. The man deliberately closed the door to ensure peace. Since it won't work out now, the child insists on seeing it in the evening, which would also be a good option. Still, Keon left, and the door closed. Lily gave the little girl a strange look. Blue Eyes has never seen the two of them talk for so long, considering it's rushers. For some reason, it seemed that the heroine was afraid of Keon, but in fact, this man is of a different race. Outwardly, they resemble people, but the blood of the beast flows in their veins, so they are very different. The blood of a wolf flows inside such animals, which gives them many opportunities in the physical and mental plane. Ordinary people often say that they feel a strange fear when they are around another race. Most likely, every feared Reisher for the same reason. But for now, it was the Emperor who was most to be feared. The woman shakes her head, trying to push unimportant thoughts aside and forget. The most important thing is the arrival of Lady Tilienne. She is already on her way, so she will be at the mansion tomorrow morning. There is no longer any hope for father's leniency. Everyone is for himself. The man probably won't understand, but the beauty simply has no other choice. She will have to act on her own. Walking forward down the corridor, the mistress asks the maid to follow right behind her. The main character left because she was not allowed in by order. Kian asks if it is possible to arrange a meeting for the evening. The refusal is heard without delay. As soon as the girl is met in the corridor, it is better to turn around and leave. The hero asks not to say a word about the baby for some time. All this time, he was too rude to hers. The teacher will arrive very soon, and the beauty will be given to her. Kian doesn't dare contradict or try to persuade, so he immediately agrees. Tilienne looks out of the carriage window. For some reason, she never thought she would ever end up in the north. Seymour was originally a servant to the Empress and lived a dignified life, but something happened. Having lost her second daughter, the woman went mad, changing servants day after day like gloves. Tilienne, like everyone else, was thrown out. She was left on the street with nothing, and on top of all that, humiliated. To make matters worse, a famine struck the county, leaving the family alone and on the brink of ruin. The girl asked her entourage for help, but no one extended a hand to her, and then one day she met a nobleman. The man asked if the brunette wanted to give the Empress, a girl, a new child. At first, the heroine didn't even understand what was being discussed, so she had to ask again. When the queen sees the little girl, she will accept her as her own and will regain her sanity. Such were the assumptions. Of course, the blonde's madness arose from the deaths of her daughters. Then everything seems quite logical. The baby must be an aristocrat, so that she can calmly enter the palace and appear without creating unnecessary problems. As it turned out, Duke Solgren was just looking for a governess for his little daughter. Once the lady has won the child's trust, she is obliged to bring her to the castle, and then Seymour will provide support. Evriel is not of the imperial family, but of the same origin. Understanding who they are talking about, the beauty wonders whether His Majesty himself will be against it. As it turned out, the Emperor himself wanted to get the baby that was his order. Perhaps the hero wants to take the Duchess hostage and put a collar on her. To fulfill her plan, Seymour must bring the girl to where they want to see her. Just 20 minutes ago, the blonde was standing by the window and looking at the carriage, realizing that Tilienne had arrived. The woman who brought Evri as a gift to the Empress is terrible, and that is already known. When children begin to walk, governesses are immediately hired for them who begin their education. The Solgrens also placed an ad several times, but the family has a sick and powerless head. The family was considered almost dead, so ordinary teachers did not want to get involved. When the blonde turned 4 years old, a governess was never found, and this became a problem. The servants were also very worried, but suddenly she appeared that very savior. Tilienne is the one who, despite everything, agreed to teach. Bowing her head, the brunette says how pleased she is to meet you, and then smiles pleasantly. The woman was still pleasant and polite, but the little girl was longing for her father, who was ill. Over time, Hervin became worse, and after Lily left, his condition worsened even further, to the point of no return. Tilienne was the sole guardian, and when the Duchess turned 9, a new system was introduced. The girl noted that it was worth going to the capital, where the environment was more favorable. They pressed on the sore spot, because there are probably many doctors there who will help cure the Duke. Hervin didn't think twice, and sent his daughter to the city. He believed that this was a great opportunity to become better. The father thinks that the girl is not good enough. That seems to be all that is on his mind. The little girl tried to think positively. There really are a lot of talented doctors in the capital. A plan formed in her head. When the heroine grows up, she wants to return and help her dad. Not knowing Tilienne's true nature, the blonde thought that there was no need to worry that she would help if anything happened. After her arrival, the governess's behavior changed. She screamed constantly. Then it seemed that all the words were pure truth, and everything she taught was absolutely necessary to learn. The same thoughts remained in my head about how to help Hervin. Everything else was so unimportant. When Evri realized the teacher's intentions, it was already too late. The heroine turned 10, and she was brought to the Empress. The Mad Queen called the blonde by the names of her daughters, doing it in a strange order. The memories make her feel creepy, and as she walks down the stairs, the little girl also greets Seymour. The brunette thought that there would be a kitten-like girl who had absolutely no knowledge of etiquette, But it turned out that this was not the case. The woman can't even imagine that she taught manners to the little girl, who now takes advantage of them. Smiling Uriel suggests that they finally begin their classes, as she had been waiting for this. Come to think of it was strange from the start. An aristocrat from the capital couldn't come to the north just to teach. Ultimately, in order to take the family hostage, the emperor carried out his plan. In order not to seem strange, the beauty smiles and asks if Tyrant is against it. Hesitantly, the woman agrees to start today, glad to see the desire for knowledge. The lady doesn't know anything anyway, so you can start from the basics. In the governess's head, it's easy. The dreams crumbled very soon, when it became clear that the child could do everything, even the most basic things. Digging through the materials, the brunette tries to understand how such a level of knowledge is possible. Yawning slightly, the heroine asks when classes start. She has been waiting for half an hour already. Starting to get angry, the lady promises that she will soon teach to a higher level. All that remains is to wait a little. Opening the book, he asks a question about the difference between the calendars of Shea and Levankel. The smile is visible, because in this case, the lady will get what she deserves. Evry is not the least bit embarrassed. The goddess's version is based on the change in brightness of the planet Mook and Levankel's on the sun. Nodding, the woman freezes. She doesn't understand. Now she's even more confused because it all seems unreal. Trying to add something, the lady quickly stumbles, because the child himself knows everything perfectly well. All this is very interesting and definitely makes you smile. The blonde also wants to ask some interesting question. I would like to know what the constellation of the Protective Cross looks like when observing the Promera group of planets. Time ran out, but no answer was given. The little girl herself told about the Greek cross. The strange thing is that the teacher doesn't even know what a little child like this girl knows. Freezing, the brunette realizes that they are speaking to her in a different language. A simple child cannot know such words. Screaming about deception, the lady wants to run away, but she is shut up. Solgren would not behave like that, with someone they had been looking for so long. Seymour was told that the child had never been taught before, but this does not seem to be true. It's offensive what happened, but in the beauty's opinion, it's worth nothing. Folding her arms across her chest, the lady concludes her remark by saying that she is much smarter than the teacher. The father will probably ask how the lesson went and what new things his daughter learned. She is going to tell him the truth. Either they continue their pointless pursuits, or Tilian will return and find another way to save his family. The heroine somehow found out all the details. Now it's clear why she never had governesses. The blonde knew the purpose of her visit from the very beginning, and even prepared a plan. This is unthinkable. The Duke's assistant is now in the office, where you can go. This is said only by the way. Keanu was told that the lady knows history etiquette and a foreign language. Rasher himself does not understand. The child does not really know how to speak, and cannot have such a broad range of knowledge. On top of all this, the Duchess threatened the woman, and she is asked to give details. The girl fell silent. If the Duchess knew about the problems, it was not a fact that Hervin was also aware. It doesn't matter anymore. The lady doesn't agree to such terrible conditions, so she's going to leave. The girl was afraid of the child she was supposed to teach. She is definitely incompetent and is no longer needed. Kian understood everything, but since the girl was complaining about difficulties, there was nothing to be done. It remained to end the conversation. The carriage for the return to the capital will be prepared very soon. You won't have to wait. That same day, the lady escaped from the mansion, and this time it happened much faster than expected. The conversation method worked like a charm. In her past life, the lady used Uriel because she was easy to control. Now the heroine managed to achieve her goal only thanks to her perseverance. The heroine will be able to turn everything upside down using her excellent knowledge. Smiling, the girl is about to go to her father. She wants to talk. In the corridor outside, the door stands Brontes, shouting that Tilian must not come back. The Solgrens have 3 powerful vassals. One of them is May, another is Vibine, and the third is Brontes. One of them is the most terrible, and this also became clear only in a past life. Those 3 were the ones who insisted on hiring a governess. They thought it was right. The blonde didn't understand before, but now it seems strange how everything turned out. Naturally, education is an important part of the process for the successor of the Earth. The only thing that doesn't add up is that when the girl as the only heir was left with the Empress, no one thought about how to take her away. It was convenient for the Trinity to remove Hervin, who had lost his daughter and was very ill. There may be potential traitors among everyone, which is not good. The Virgo tries to think that everyone here is like-minded, but it is difficult. Brontes is a relative of the Solgrens, from a side branch, the one who is closest. If all the heirs die, he will be the one to follow them. This realization comes unexpectedly. Kian opens the door. The man is not allowed to enter, as the Duke is not in the best condition. The brunette wants to come in for a moment to discuss what to do after the governess ran away. For some unknown reason, this man is overly concerned about the baby's education. It's also not worth drawing conclusions without understanding. Emerging from the shadows, the little girl greets Rasher. Making eyes again, the little girl asks if she can come in, but the answer has not changed. Distracting from the conversation, the brunette standing next to him asks to talk. He has one question. Sitting down at the table, the young man asks if it is true that he and Tilian did not get along, and if she was really that terrible. The man got straight to the point. It seems the lady simply didn't want to teach the child and was scared. If the brunette had been met more gently, this would not have happened. Brontes believes that it is not too late to fix everything. The girl must receive a good education and become an heir so that the master is not disappointed. The words are exactly the same as what Seymour said back then in her past life. It becomes clear that Brontes and Tilian are accomplices, which was impossible to understand at first. To deal with the Duchess, who was an eyesore, the man took a risk and called his friend. It seemed that everything would be simple, but on the very first day, the lady came running almost hysterically. After the words that the girl knew everything, the heroine simply ran away. She didn't want to get involved in any unnecessary problems. The character sat on a luxurious chair, casually holding a pipe in his hand. His face reflected light irony, as if what was happening amused him. In his thoughts, he regretfully noted that if the Duke knew, he would have immediately fired the maid. Tilian was frightened by a stupid childish joke and ran away. Now she can't help in any way. Nothing can be changed. 3 people are standing at the door. A tall man with a serious expression next to him is a short boy and a man with red hair. The red-haired man is thinking hard that this situation is his best chance to get closer to the Duchess. There is a hidden purpose and determination in his eyes. The task must be completed. A little girl with big violet eyes looks up with a slight puzzlement and innocence on her face. Her white hair neatly arranged in the dark thoughts of an adult. The realization hangs over her that it would not be difficult to deceive a 5-year-old child. The girl remains in the dark about what is happening. A man with red hair and a stern expression looks ahead, tensely. Determination is visible in his gaze, as if he is trying to convey an obvious truth. Confidence is growing inside him, and he mentally exclaims that this is obvious, not allowing himself to doubt his rightness. The character's hands carefully hold the cup. The subtle aroma of tea fills the space. The question about Lady Tilian sounded unexpected. Causing confusion, Brontes confusedly answered that he did not know her nervousness was felt in every word, and the atmosphere became more and more tense. Evriel, still holding the cup of tea, smirks. She is surprised that the man speaks so confidently, although he clearly does not know the girl. The hero begins to get nervous, not believing that the Duke could somehow magically guess everything. This should not have happened under any circumstances. Slightly tilting her head, the beauty continues her game with a slight grin. Her words sound like an innocent question, but there is a mockery hidden in them. The man understands that this is possible. She claims that she is worried about the future of the family and well-being. But the word well-being causes her only a quiet inner laughter, because it is clear that he wishes them all death. The red-haired man stands with confidence, but there is a slight tension in his gestures. He confirms that the other man is of noble Sogran blood, and that the mission of Keeper of the Veil will inevitably pass to him. But he expresses concern that his education may be inferior to that of other aristocrats. The guy with a tense expression on his face thoughtfully curses the girl, wondering when the promised day will come. His attention focused on the figure standing in front of him. The heroine, without turning around, asks the question, "Do you really think so?" Her calmness contrasts with his growing anxiety. Still sitting in the center of the room, the brunette asks a question with a hint of incomprehension. His expression remains wary. Evriel does not rush to answer, only coldly remarks that she will explain everything when the vassals gather. She is confident in her position, making it clear that the reason why she does not need a governess is obvious and additional explanations are unnecessary. A little girl with white hair stands next to a tall woman in a strict dress. She asks worriedly if everything will be okay. Her gaze is full of anxiety. The woman looks down at her with slight bewilderment, not understanding what exactly is being discussed. A feeling of uncertainty and anticipation hangs in the air. The maid turns to her charge, reminding her of the request to open the treasury through Lord Kyan, but she notices that the Duke did not give permission for this action. The little girl, slightly turning her head, silently looks forward, hiding her emotions behind external calm in her head. It is still decided, but Lily does not suspect it. A little earlier, the hero with long dark hair, slightly raising an eyebrow, looks at the interlocutor with interest in his hands. He holds scrolls and papers, as if he had just interrupted his work. His question puzzledly sounded in the silence. Concerns the treasury, causing the interlocutor to become slightly wary. The girl excitedly shares that she has never been to the treasury. Her curiosity growing with every word, the man with his hands folded listens to her while the maid stands nearby. Watching their conversation, the girl's questions clearly aroused interest, and the atmosphere filled with anticipation. The young man frowns and says, thoughtfully, considering the proposal, and below are characters in a comic stylization. A girl promises that if he opens the door, she will no longer interfere with his hard work. A maid stands nearby, watching the scene with a smile. The atmosphere becomes lighter, as if the tension has disappeared. The little girl with sparkling violet eyes confidently states that Kian has given them access, and now everything is fine. She reminds them of the upcoming important meeting, adding that they cannot distract their father in her voice. There is a desire to act according to the plan, despite her young age. The winter silence spreads over the city. Everything is covered with a blanket of snow after December. The severe cold begins, which lasts for a whole month. Snowdrifts cover houses and streets, creating a feeling of deep winter peace. Whirlwinds give the city an atmosphere of a cold but calm winter, which will soon end, not on a positive note. Every year in November, there is an important meeting dedicated to preparations for the harsh winter. During this period, all the vassals gather in the mansion to discuss the plan of action for the coming months. Horse-drawn carriages are lined up in front of the gates, ready to enter the courtyard, while the cold wind picks up. At the meeting, an important issue is discussed: the monthly distribution of provisions and provision of fresh water for everyone on the street. A man with a tool in his hands encounters a wolf standing in the snow barrels of provisions serve as a reminder that resources are extremely important in the harsh winter. The heroine smiles enthusiastically, assuring herself that everything will be fine. Her face radiates optimism, but internally, she admits that her actions now do not seem right to her. A bright smile contrasts with a slight doubt that remains deep inside. The child with white hair squints slyly, her finger raised to her chin in a thoughtful gesture. Every, with a slight smile, notices that it seems a bit cold here. Violet eyes sparkle in the background, adding a playfulness to her expression that entices. She makes herself out to be a victim. The maid, worried about the cold, exclaims that she knew she should have put on a warmer coat. She promises to bring it quickly, her face reflecting slight concern, because initially, she should have taken better care of the girl. Solgren remains in place, keeping calm, while the situation around her is resolved with care. She waits for the right moment. The girl knows very well that she put on a thin coat on purpose, mentally apologizing to Lily. But her thoughts quickly switch to the task at hand. She is determined to finish everything before the maid returns. Before it is too late, determination is visible in every movement as she quickly takes action. A little girl stands in a dimly lit room, her expression serious, thinking about the magical castle that she learned only reacts to members of the Sogren family. Her gaze focused about to take important action based on her hunch. Carefully touching the magical door, her hand trembles slightly, but her confidence grows with each passing moment. Suddenly, the doors begin to open, and her face lights up with determination. She joyfully exclaims that she has succeeded, standing in front of the shining stars that symbolize her success. A shining winter twig, surrounded by light, appears before his eyes. The hero mentally notes that he hasn't seen it for a long time. The twig is a family treasure passed down from generation to generation to protect the veil. Its magical aura emphasizes the significance and power of this artifact, as well as the fact that it is not allowed to be used by just anyone. The magical cane glows with a cold light, shimmering with snowflakes. Solgren remembers that this item was created from a part of the ancient spirit of winter. Another important sprout its power, and ancient origins make it even more important for protection and maintaining balance. The girl with a serious and thoughtful expression on her face recalls that the magical branch was originally supposed to belong to her father. Her violet eyes reflecting deep thoughts about how everything has changed and why she now holds this responsibility in her hands despite her age. The girl sadly thinks about her father knowing that he will not be able to withstand the icy mana emanating from the magical winter branch due to his weak health. The artifact symbolically reaches out to him, but its cold power is too great for his weakened body. It is not so easy for her to take possession of. Looking thoughtfully into the distance, the beauty thinks, and then her face is suddenly illuminated with determination. She understands that she needs to possess the magic twig, but a bitter realization emerges in her thoughts in her past life. Her attempts failed many times. This memory adds weight to her decision. Evriel squeezes her hand, trying to overcome her doubts. Her thoughts are clear. She can't be a coward. She resolutely reaches out to the magic twig, firmly convinced of her goal. She is sure that she can, that she must show her abilities. The glow of the thing illuminates her determined face. The light is too bright, so much so that it becomes uncomfortable. Clutching the staff tightly in her hands, Solgren silently concentrates, raising her gaze to the heavens, asking for support from the magical relic. She mentally admits that without its power, she will not be able to protect her family and father. And this is now, in the first place, each of her words echoes in her heart, awakening hope. The men gathered around a long wooden table discuss current affairs. One of them mentions the need to maintain the defense at level 3 until the end of the cold weather. Such a decision can save many people. Another vassal smiles and says that he recently acquired excellent swords, which he will show next time. Another of those gathered, turning to those around him, expresses bewilderment at the fact that the Duke still trusts an assistant of another race, who on the contrary does not deserve a place in the castle. He notes that Hervin also follows the unfair orders of the imperial family, which should not even have been applied. The guy clenches his fist in obvious contempt. His face tense when all he can do is try to restrain himself. Brontes reflects on how the main one is weak and reckless, the Duke expressing his disappointment. These thoughts gnaw at him. He does not understand how such a person could get such a high position. The man expresses indignation and inner irritation, but says nothing to avoid getting into trouble. He is convinced that the Duke, whom he despises for his weakness and stupidity, has taken his place. Bitter words flash through his thoughts. If it were not for this man, he would become the ruler of the North Envy, and hidden emotions drive him, not allowing him to think about the reality of the situation, and he hatches plans to seize power. The hero is sure that time will be on his side, and if he waits, the North will sooner or later be in his hands. A white-haired character sits at a table, clutching his head, obviously suffering from pain or fatigue. He tries to concentrate, but the pain prevents him from continuing, causing him to suddenly double over with a heavy sigh. He suggests moving on to the next question, but soon Kian, standing next to him, suggests ending the discussion and postponing it until tomorrow, realizing that things could end too badly. In the hall at a large table, the serious situation is still being discussed. One of the participants in the meeting notes, with alarm, that the head's condition has worsened again. Everyone around understands that the Solgrens are on the brink. The situation is heating up, tension hangs in the air, and everyone feels a growing crisis. A man with a determined look tells the audience to control their words. His voice is stern, and the atmosphere is tense. In the next panel, another man repeats his statement, reminding that the discussion of the remaining issues will be postponed to the next meeting. The hero in the brown suit stands confidently in front of the man sitting at the table. He leaned forward with a slight smirk on his face, and without waiting for permission, says that he needs to discuss something before the end of the meeting. His goal is to raise the issue regarding the mistress's governess, because they need a new person to carry out the plan. The focus of the meeting is now on Brontes. Another man leaning over the table asks, in surprise, what he means the governess has already been found, unless of course there has been a mistake. The other participants of the meeting are sitting at the table listening to him with attention, while the discussion takes a new turn concerning previous agreements. A subtle smile can be seen on his face, and the brunette tells those present that Lady Tillian returned on the very first day, because she could not stand it. And he also adds that something bad clearly happened, as if enjoying the intrigue that had arisen, his gaze full of hidden malice, as if he knew in advance about the unforeseen circumstances. Brontes, his head half down, reflects maliciously on what is happening. A cunning light flickers in his eyes. He is sure that as soon as the vassals find out that the governess ran away on her first working day, their trust in the Duchess will disappear. His secret pleasure at the coming consequences is clearly evident on his face. Everyone remembered the Duchess as she had been the previous year, uncertain and constrained. She barely knew how to say hello, had no knowledge of etiquette at all, and tried to run away from the crowd of people. Every step she took was tense and awkward. But now, seeing her, those around her could not help but notice the changes. But the past still cast a shadow on her present. The hero is silent, turning towards the light. A thought sounds in his head. This is his chance, which he simply must use. Now he is determined to change the situation in his favor. A smile of self-satisfaction flashes across his face. His plan is to lure the majority to his side. The Duchess, in a panic, suddenly stops, raising her hand with a sharp cry. Stop! Her eyes are wide open, and her face is full of determination and despair. She managed, and is now glad that she will do something. The maid next to her shudders and exclaims in fear because she did not manage to stop the lord. The future duke, standing a little further away, says in surprise, Duchess? The young man stands thoughtfully, tension sliding across his face as he says the Duchess's name out loud. Everyone in the room freezes, waiting for his next move, and his thoughts are boiling, trying to understand what she is up to. Meanwhile, her plan remains unknown, as well as her plans for the future. The little girl confidently moves forward, approaching her father's table. She sat motionless, her gaze focused, and behind her the tension grew. The servants looked at each other, doubting whether this was really the same Duchess. They knew her behavior, and perfect greeting made them doubt their previous ideas. Now this person was very different. The little girl smiled, her eyes shining with determination and a little excitement. Inside, she felt proud of her decision. I would like to show the esteemed Duke something, she said, raising her hand to her heart. Her voice confident, as if she knew the moment had come, and the words were pleasant to the ears. Brontes, raising his hand in irritation, addresses the Duchess demandingly, insisting on an answer as to what she intends to do in this situation. His indignation increases when he casts a disdainful glance at the model of the fortress, arguing that now is not the time for games, which will definitely be given attention only after the meeting. A little girl with bright violet eyes stops abruptly, her face reflecting determination and indignation. Clenching her hand into a fist, she asks a loud question full of indignation. How can you call an important thing a toy? Something inside her changes, and a magical symbol begins to glow on her palm, awakening an unknown force. The Duchess happily picks up the magical branch, smiling proudly, her face glowing with enthusiasm, and her eyes full of sparkle. She is ready to demonstrate the power of this artifact. Meanwhile, the man opposite is shocked. He cannot believe his eyes, and exclaims in surprise, because the winter branch always seemed to be something unattainable. The little Duchess confidently holds a magic branch in her hands, looking at her interlocutor with determination. She is full of enthusiasm to master this power as soon as possible, before the start of lessons with the governess. The heroine is sure that if you use this artifact correctly, then you can spend the winter in warmth and comfort. The branch has always been filled with a magical aura. The middle of winter brings with it the harshest cold, and it is this branch that is able to absorb the cold and manipulate it. Using mana, it becomes an important symbol of control over the elements. He clenched his fist, not believing his eyes. Excitement overwhelmed him, and indignation burst out. The hero was sure that this was some kind of deception. It was impossible for what was happening to be real. His thoughts were spinning, and his voice trembled with rage and disbelief. The man in rich clothes points nervously with his hand. His voice sounds indignant. He loudly declares that he has never heard of anyone receiving the branch. Before coming of age, there is a mixture of bewilderment and anger in his voice, and his posture expresses displeasure and distrust of what is happening. The girl with an indignant expression on her face holds a magic wand in her hand. Her eyes are wide open, and her voice is full of indignation. She objects to the accusation, exclaiming that there is no deception, and reproaches her opponent for rudeness. With confidence, she adds that if she were deceiving, she would not show her power. The beauty explains with a determined expression that the Duke gave her the winter branch, confirming her words with pride, her large purple eyes shining as she tells this to those present. One of the men in the room is shocked by her words, which immediately causes a tense reaction among the rest of the meeting. Being a little wary, the hero ponders the sudden news. His gaze is tense, and his thoughts are restless. Did the Duke really help her master such power? His doubts begin to turn into panic, because such events can radically change the balance of power. The boy is shocked. His face expresses anxiety and confusion. He can't believe what he heard. The Duke was too weak due to illness, and it seemed that he was not even able to move. Thoughts overwhelm him. Did he really help to take possession of the branch? He stood there looking ahead with a frown, a cold determination in his eyes, thoughts rushing through his head. His condition was indeed improving. Doubts were beginning to creep in, but outwardly, he remained cool, preparing for the next step. The girl watches what is happening carefully, thinking to herself that this man must have come to the same conclusion as she did. The scene where Kian opened the door to the treasury pops up in her thoughts. But she decides that since he is her father's assistant, this is essentially the same thing. The hero turns to the man, trying to verify the truth of the Duchess's words. His voice sounds with notes of doubt, and he clarifies whether the Duchess is really the owner of the winter branch. The guy sitting at the table looks a little surprised by this question. The man in dark clothes straightens up his voice, trembling with surprise. He asks the Duke if the Duchess really owns the winter branch, his face expressing doubt and tension. The Duke, after a pause, slightly frowning, confirms this, crying out in surprise, then declares that Uriel is simply magnificent. The hero looks on in surprise, his gaze full of awareness and slight shock. Thoughts take hold of him. He thought that his fate was sealed, and he was destined to only watch the decline of the Solgrens. But what is happening in front of him seems to change his perception of reality. The girl smiles happily, holding a branch in her hands, symbolizing her incredible achievement. Her face glows with happiness, and those around her congratulate her on this victory. For such a young age, her success seems amazing, and amazing admiration for her spreads throughout the hall. The blond man, standing with an elegant hand gesture, maintains his composure. Despite the admiration in the air, he gently interrupts the conversation, mentioning that it is not the time to talk about the teacher, while the thought of the future of the Solgren family is born as a new hope. Hervin calmly lowers himself, announcing that the meeting is over and everyone is free to go, his calm and confidence leaving no doubt as to who is in charge. Here he controls every movement, every word, and cuts off anyone from the council who wanted to object to something. Evriel stood in front of him, with a branch in her hands, her eyes sparkling with excitement, a slight smile on her face. She said that she wanted to say something else. The young man listened attentively, slightly frowning, asking what exactly. His face became serious, and he quietly told her to follow him, outlining something important, but away from the eyes of other people. The girl lowered her head nervously, crossing her arms. Her thoughts were racing. She expected her father to scold her, because his displeasure seemed obvious. However, contrary to her expectations, the situation did not turn out. As she imagined, the look at her father's clenched fist increased her anxiety. The beauty looked at her fingers with quiet surprise, feeling how excitement and fear gradually gave way to the realization that the branch had truly submitted to her will. Although until that moment she had not been confident in her powers, this thought filled her head, instilling new confidence. The daughter looked intently at the symbol on her hand. She clearly remembered the moment when thinking about protecting her family. She felt something akin to this branch. This realization filled her soul with strength and confidence in her destiny. The Duke looked at her carefully. His voice was stern, but reservedly approving. He noted that at her age, he would not have been able to master such power. All the heads of their family received branches only upon reaching adulthood, and this made her achievement unique, worthy of respect. Folding her arms across her chest, Evry looked straight into her father's eyes. His gaze was stern and focused. He warned her that it was too early to rejoice, because she still needed to be scolded. Squinting questioningly, he asked if Kian had told her the way to the artifact, clearly suspecting his interference. That day, with a serious and focused look, the young man said that in the center of the treasury there was a stone gate behind which the main relic of the Solgren's family was kept. He warned that it could be dangerous there and insistently asked not to touch them under any circumstances. Evriel nodded slightly in response, with a guilty expression on her face. Realizing that her actions had not gone unnoticed, with a cold tone, the man standing opposite her emphasized that she had ignored the warning and even dragged Lily into her actions, which only made the situation worse. Guiltily lowering her gaze, she admitted her mistake to the vassals, feeling the weight of guilt pressing on her shoulders. But despite this, she believed in her strength, because the Winter Branch chose her, and she was sure that she would cope with the responsibility placed on her. The man with his arms folded looked sternly at the girl. His voice sounded cold and decisive. He forbade her to use the branch until she came of age. Meanwhile, the girl with a determined expression on her face nodded and rushed to the door, firmly deciding that she needed to learn how to handle the branch. The Duke, with a cold expression on his face, folded his arms silently, ponders looking at his daughter, who is clearly worried Hervin does not suspect. But this winter will be terrible because of the snow avalanche. The girl does not remember the exact details, but understands that they definitely need to be prepared for absolutely everything. Evriel looks up, hopefully trying to catch his eye, her voice trembling with excitement as she asks for permission, trying to speak as confidently as possible. The blonde sincerely strives to earn his trust and support, trying to convince him of her intentions that this is important to her. The man looks at his daughter with a stern expression as he sits down next to her, his words sounding serious as he warns her that wielding a branch is one thing, but being able to control it is another. He worries about her fragile body, especially mentioning that absorbing the harsh cold could be dangerous for her. Evriel flushes with excitement, her face tense and her eyes burning with determination. She exclaims that the cold is much more dangerous, her voice trembling with emotion, the strong lines and dynamic colors around her, highlighting her inner protest and dissent. He looks down at her, the argument behind him, his words sharp and firm. The tall man's figure a stark contrast to the small girl who is clearly worried. Despite her protest, he reminds her that they have been coping with the cold for years. Even without the help of the Winter Branch, there is no point in going back to something so dangerous now, when there is no great need for it. Evriel, holding back tears, slowly turns away after she was told to go back to her room, her small hand clutching the hem of her robe as if trying to find comfort in her thoughts. But nothing really helped. Her mind was still spinning with a question she didn't dare ask out loud. Why didn't her father believe her? The blonde could hardly contain her emotions, watching the stern expression on his face. The girl was struggling with her inner feelings. Her tears betrayed the tension. The words that the situation was getting out of control flashed through her head. But a voice inside asked her to look at the man. A bit of concern, and even a little sadness could be seen in his eyes. The main character stared at the man, noticing something new in his expression, right after those very words. Her heart sank when she realized that there was worry hidden behind the cold mask. Her voice was quiet but full of excitement. She wondered if her father was really worried about her, feeling the excitement reflected on his face. Evriel stood still watching as the one she loved most walked away, leaving her in the shadow of his determination. No more words were spoken, because he had decided so. His voice was quiet but firm, as he told her to rest, to leave the room, and not to think about the branch of winter. Her eyes followed him, as if trying to catch something unsaid. But his figure was already beginning to dissolve in the semi-darkness, leaving no chance. Suddenly freezing, the girl realized that something had gone wrong. Her eyes widened, and her heart began to beat faster. She leaned forward sharply, realizing with horror that she had not received permission. A whirlwind of self-accusations swirled in her thoughts, causing her to silently curse her inattention. It was worth pressing to finally get what she coveted. Stopping for a moment, the beauty looked around in confusion. Her thoughts suddenly switched to something strange, as if someone had spoken to her before. But she did not remember who, exactly. Looking around uncertainly, she quietly wondered who it could be, because there was no one around. That tone and voice seemed unfamiliar. Solgren, the younger, looked around the room thoughtfully, feeling tired from a long day full of events. Her head was scattered, too much had happened, and she felt how sleep was gradually falling upon her. Stretching, the beauty slightly lost concentration, barely staying on her feet, and quietly whispered to herself that she wanted to sleep. She had absolutely no strength left. The day ended quickly. Evriel slowly opened her eyes, still immersed in sleep, in order to look around. A voice insistently called her to wake up. Although there was silence around, these were still some tricks of the brain. She tried to understand where this strange whisper was coming from, which seemed both distant and close. A feeling of misunderstanding crept into her consciousness, awakening anxiety. It was difficult to gather herself. She had to tense up immediately after hearing a voice telling her that she was in danger. She turned her head sharply in fear, but her thoughts did not have time to comprehend what was happening. As a mysterious stranger appeared in front of her. "Who are you, and how dare you break into my room?" She thought, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. And then a scream rang out. The young man with his head down apologizes. Feeling guilty, Kion's voice sounds quiet and humble, but his interlocutor, standing with his back to him, calmly replies that he did not forbid him to enter the treasury. He was too busy at that moment to pay attention to such trifles. Therefore, he has the right to blame only himself. The man with a serious expression on his face says thoughtfully that he himself did not expect such a turn of events. His gaze is directed to the side, as if he is considering what happened. A slight shadow of worry and responsibility falls on his features when a picture of what happened at that meeting quickly floats into his head. A man with short dark hair leans forward, offering to discuss the lady's governess, with a slight grin, his face radiating confidence, as if he already knows that this proposal should arouse interest. The atmosphere of a tense meeting enveloping the room. This time he was interrupted right in the middle of a sentence, not allowing him to finish his thought. The hero stands in the shadows, his hands behind his back, his gaze directed to the side, as if he is immersed in his own thoughts. The moon illuminates him dimly, emphasizing the thoughtful expression on his face. A realization flashes through his thoughts. The lady has really changed, and this is noticeable to everyone. Thoughtfully looking into the distance, the guy did not hold back his gaze. He was full of doubts. Thoughts revolved around the words of Lady Tillian. He could not be sure if she was telling the truth. When he noticed how the lady behaved differently, and this feeling of uncertainty did not leave him, forcing him to analyze her words again and again and try to unravel her true motives. The boy stood thoughtfully, touching his chin with his fingers, as if considering possible actions. His companion suggested telling the lady about his concerns. But he remained silent, digesting what he had heard, tension reflected in his eyes. And his thoughts were confused, trying to find the right solution. Kian chuckled slightly, his eyes sparkling with cunning, when he heard the question about eavesdropping. His hand habitually slid to his ear, as if confirming his words. He calmly stated that he had the excellent hearing inherent in his race, and no details escaped him. The blonde slowly raised his hand, as if thinking about his words. There was a cold detachment in his voice. He said that any normal father would be worried in such a situation, but he was not. His tone was quiet, but there was a determination in it that left no room for doubt. The winter grew harsher, and each day the frequency of the attacks increased. The symptoms seemed to worsen with inexorable speed, causing his body to weaken, fatigue to take hold of him, making every movement painful. Those around him silently watching, helplessly clenching their fists. Death creeping ever closer, its cold breath already felt in the shadows of the room, penetrating the hearts of those who witnessed his agony. He understands that his actions only confuse his daughter. Although he does this unintentionally, his gaze, sometimes cold, sometimes full of anxiety, reflected an internal struggle. because he realized that his behavior confused the little girl. Sometimes he showed indifference. Sometimes he worried about her. Then he was kind, but soon he pushed her away again, not allowing her to get used to something more. No matter how hard he tries to deny the obvious, the man is still a pathetic imitation of the Duke. The child did nothing to deserve the bad treatment that is now consuming her, leaving not a single personal particle. The hero stood in the semi-darkness of the room. His gaze was directed into the void, and contradictions were boiling inside him. He wanted to do too much, but the possibilities did not coincide with this. There was a cold determination in his words. It was better to become Every's nightmare than her father. Fear for her gave birth to severity in him, because this is how he believed she would be able to survive in a cruel world that was ready to do anything to end a happy life. His gaze became softer, despite the cold words. He understood that in the baby's heart, he was just a shadow of the past, a terrible dream from which she would wake up one day. The slight smile on his face did not hide the bitterness that was hidden inside. When she forgot about him, her life would become better, he thought. The hero stood in silence, thoughtfully looking into the void, his face expressing complex emotions, as if the struggle inside was tearing him apart. Thoughts about how he was confusing Every did not leave him. He behaved sometimes indifferently, sometimes restlessly, sometimes friendly. He realizes that he is bringing confusion into her soul. Kian calmly asks if everything is all right, but does not receive an answer because the Duke falls unconscious on the cold floor. A dark figure in a mask, holding a dagger, pierced the tense atmosphere. His eyes sparkled with determination, and an ominous blue light spread around him, a lightning-fast movement. And the enemy is ready to attack. He exhales one word full of threat and danger. The attack has happened. A bad feeling is in the air. Brontes, in a stern uniform, his expression unreadable, holds a glass of drink in his hand as he addresses the Duchess. His voice full of concern, but beneath the surface, there is something more. He reminds her that it is time for bed, as if trying to maintain control of the situation, and pretends not to be standing in her room in the middle of the night. The brunette looks at him with a hard gaze. His teeth are clenched. His thoughts are full of determination. He whispers to himself that he will deal with the girl first, as if she is his main target. The luxurious Sorgan's mansion rises before him, cold and majestic, promising new conspiracies. He is going to return here in a year, when the meeting becomes inevitable, and make sure that the future is good. Despite her young age, the Duchess's power is growing every day, and she is already close to taking control of the Winter Branch, which of course will not be something positive. At the same time, disappointment is growing in Brontes' thoughts. All the plans that seemed reliable are now collapsing. He has no right to allow something terrible to happen. The man is overcome with fear. He understands that any improvement in the Duke's condition will lead him to inevitable death. The Emperor will not give him a chance to justify himself. He still clearly realizes that his fate is predetermined. The Emperor wants to see the blonde dead in order to eliminate him as an obstacle in his path. The girl looks closely at the man, noticing how his gaze has changed. Something in his expression has become alarming, and her heart squeezes with anxiety. She tries to calm herself down, thinking that he does not have any weapons with him. But the thought does not give her peace, because it is not known what exactly has changed in his intentions. The boy does not let go of the small blue vessel, because it is important his movements are slow, but confident. He says that it is a common antipyretic, but there is some carelessness in his voice, as if he himself does not believe in what he said. His gaze is cold, and his actions seem deliberate. Every looks at the man with rage and disbelief, her eyes full of indignation. She does not believe his words about the fever reducer, and asks sharply. It seems she suspects him of hiding his true intentions. Her voice is full of defiance when she sarcastically asks if he is going to pass off her death as a failed training with the Winter Branch. Most antipyretics contained poisonous herbs that lowered the body temperature, making the pain go away. However, she understood that if she drank the medicine in its pure form without proper processing, it could lead to death from hypothermia, ending the horrors. The girl stood resolutely, showing that she was not afraid. Holding her head high despite the anxiety inside, she knew that if her body was found cold in the morning, Everyone would believe the version that the reason was training with the winter branch. There was despair in her voice, but she stubbornly walked towards her goal, not wanting to give in to fear of the possible consequences. Her gaze gradually fills with concern as she notices the man's expression change. Fortunately, she realizes that he doesn't have a weapon on him, which gives her some relief, but she remains on guard, the thought that Lily's room is nearby. And if she screams, she will be heard, calms her down only for a moment, because there is a noise in the corridor. At this time, an unknown person, wrapped in darkness, suddenly attacks Belgrin, catching her by surprise. Brontes looks with a sly smile, holding a bottle with an unknown liquid in his hand. He offers a deal full of danger and blackmail, calmly and confidently. He says that the Duchess will be released if she just drinks the contents of the bottle, and he himself knows that he has driven her into a corner, playing on fears and a sense of responsibility for others, and especially for a loved one. His gaze changed completely, and she noticed it. Her chest is filled with anxiety, but then she sighs in relief. Fortunately, he has no weapon. Although she tries to calm down, the thought is still spinning in her head. What is he really planning? Lily screams for the heroine not to drink anything. It is best to calm down, even if the Duchess takes the medicine. Brontes will still deal with the maid. The girl tightly clutches the magic staff in her hands, gathering all her determination. She looks at the enemy. Her eyes reflect determination and fear. The man smiles mockingly in response. Not believing in the seriousness of the threat, his words are full of arrogance. He is sure that the girl will not be able to use her weapon. The girl looks at the staff in her hands with concern. She is not sure if she can use it properly, but the determination in her heart grows stronger. The thought that she can help Lily escape fills her with hope. Despite her fear, she squeezes the staff tighter, deciding to take the risk for the sake of salvation. The heroine feels an inner voice, wondering where it comes from. This unexpected dialogue in her head causes excitement, especially at such a critical moment. But the stranger does not want to waste time on explanations and directly says that they need to hurry because the approaching threat is becoming more and more obvious. He clutches the vessel tightly in his hands, his movements nervous and quick. Mentally, Brontes realizes that only wizards are able to control the magic of the winter branch. But now his choice is limited. He feels how, with each passing moment, the situation is getting out of control, but there is no turning back. The girl tightly clutches the branch in her hands, doubts flicker in her eyes. She does not consider herself a sorceress, but understands that this is only a temporary obstacle. Her thoughts are directed to the future, where she will be able to open any doors with magic. Now she feels her weakness, but believes in her strength. The man looks down, his face lit up with a malicious smile, and in his hands is a bottle. Ivriel is in despair. She does not understand what is happening, but she knows that the situation is critical. She prays for help, realizing that otherwise she will not survive. The hero offers her the only way out, to drink what is being handed to her, otherwise, as he assures she will die. In her head, she still hears a strange voice confidently saying that everything is logical, and he will help, but she shouldn't be too afraid. She tries to comprehend what she heard, but her thoughts are confused. The beauty wonders what she shouldn't be afraid of. What is this all about? And then, with anxiety in her eyes, she looks ahead, not understanding what to do next. She suddenly feels something strange. A powerful energy begins to surround her, swirling around her body. Her face is distorted with fear in her head. There is one question. What is this? The sensations are strange, as if an unknown force is invading her body, filling her consciousness. She realizes in horror. Something is moving into her, and she is unable to stop it. Her body is engulfed in an alluring and frightening whirlwind of magical energy, a voice inside explains. This is mana streams of power flowing through the whole world. The maiden clenches her teeth, trying to control this strange alien energy, but her feelings seem to explode. She screams, experiencing indescribably strange sensations. The vortex of magical energy continues to swirl around her, becoming more and more uncontrollable. A voice inside her tries to call her to calm down, warning that further resistance could lead to disaster. Her hair flutters in streams of mana, and everything around her seems to be plunging into chaos as she fights this force. The brunette, stunned by what was happening, presses his hand to his head with force, trying to understand what was happening around him. His face distorted with panic and pain, when streams of magical energy surround his body, absorbing him entirely. He tries to contain the growing power, but the magic going out of control only intensifies, forcing him to scream in despair. The girl stands in the middle of the room, clutching a stick, streams of magical energy swirling around her. She looks at her hands, shocked, her hair fluttering in a whirlwind of magic. In front of her is her opponent, thrown back by a powerful force who no longer tries to escape. She is stunned and does not understand what just happened. Everything seems unreal. The determination still flickered in her eyes. The main character already felt herself able to control the magical power, and now a door appeared on her way. "I told you not to be scared." A thought flashed through her mind right in front of her. A mysterious portal appeared in the form of an ordinary door, hiding the unknown behind it. And after a second, it began to become more and more transparent. The Duchess stared into the distance, her gaze full of mixed feelings that were changing. It was all over. The realization was slowly coming to her. Her thoughts were confused, but she knew she needed to call people to check if Lily was okay. The worry for the maid was weighing on her, making her heart squeeze as she tried to pull herself together and deal with the emotions that were flooding her. None of them deserved what they had experienced that night. The Duchess swayed slightly, feeling anxious. There were traces of blood on her fingers, and this puzzled her, because it was coming from her nose. The words of her father, who once warned her about this, floated into her head. She did not listen at this time. Kian hurries to her with concern in his eyes, exclaiming about her well-being. The Duchess is stunned, looking at Rasher in front of her. A thought flashes through her mind. He is alive. Weakness takes over, and she falls to the ground, clutching a branch in her hand. She whispers words of gratitude for saving her, but after that, she almost falls unconscious. Her last thoughts were that the man appeared at the most necessary moment, but her body could no longer resist fatigue. The blonde woke up in another room, unfamiliar and quiet. Her eyes slightly opened. She looked around the space, realizing that she was not in her bedroom. This was not the familiar corner, where she usually fell asleep. Her heart accelerated, but she held back the panic. A quiet whisper in her head reminded her to stay calm despite the strange situation. The beauty slowly sat up in bed, not fully understanding where she was. Her eyes stopped on the silhouette of a man by the bed. A quiet whisper in her head pierced her consciousness. Someone was standing next to her, with difficulty realizing what was happening. She tried to figure out who this person was. Soon it dawned on her. Her father was standing in front of her. With each moment, her thoughts became clearer. The Duchess felt weak and hot, which confused her consciousness. She thought that the hallucinations were caused by the temperature, but the strange images did not disappear. She could hardly distinguish sounds and movements around her. Her vision became clouded. A desperate thought flashed through her head. No, this is not a dream, this is reality. But she no longer had the strength to resist. In the dimly lit room, a man with white hair walked away slowly. Without turning around, his silhouette was lost in the semi-darkness, leaving behind a cold feeling of emptiness. The girl weakly extended her hand. Her voice was quiet and trembling. She did not want him to leave. A weak whisper, "Don't go, Dad," sounded like a desperate call, but the man continued on his way without stopping. The little child curled up under the blanket, buried her face in the pillow. Her eyes filled with tears that glistened, rolling down her cheeks. She tightly clutched the edge of the blanket in her hand, as if it could protect her from loneliness. A quiet, trembling voice, barely audible in the darkness. She did not want to be alone, but this feeling left her with every step of the man. Two men stood at the massive doors that seemed to hide a secret. One of them, tall and commanding, had his hand locked ready to speak. The other, with his hands behind his back, was making a report. They had completed their investigation, and the man named Brontes had been thrown into prison. There was tension in the air, as if something important was about to happen. The white-haired man, clearly the leader, turned around and praised his subordinate for his excellent work. He promised to deal with the prisoner later. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed hidden determination. The second man, listening to the praise, only slightly bowed his head, acknowledging the words of the leader behind them. The shadows of the buildings stretched into the distance, adding mystery to the scene. Kian, with a serious expression, is aware of the tension of the moment, But despite its importance, he tries to keep his emotions under control. He says that now is not the time for arguments, indicating the need to postpone the discussion. His gaze focused, while another person stands next to him, his head turned as if waiting for further action. The young man stares ahead, his gaze filled with determination. He says that there are more suitable people for this task, adding that without their involvement, the situation will become dangerous. His voice is full of confidence, but in his eyes, there's a hint of concern for the safety of the one to whom his words are addressed. The blonde reacts too strongly. His daughter almost died. It becomes scary and impossible to breathe. Everything happened because of the Duke. That's how he begins to blame himself, because next to him, the girl is in danger, even at night. No one knows how many times something like this can happen, but with different people, Brontes was closed, but that doesn't mean anything. It was for this very reason that the man did not want to leave the baby near him. He remembers the words of his wife, who asked him to protect Evriel instead of her, hoping that everything would end well. There are too many thoughts in his head that mix up, not allowing him to make the most important decision. The hero is full of determination and anger. His thoughts are focused on the fact that he is not going to leave everything as it is. Memories flash when he realizes that the enemy's condition has suddenly improved, and now he has him by the throat. He is surprised, not understanding what could have gone wrong. It seems that everything went against his plan, and now he will have to deal with the consequences of an unexpected turn. The Duke staggered back, his body tensed from the unexpected blow, and his eyes showed confusion and pain. He barely had time to realize what was happening when shadows flashed around him. The hero freezes in horror, because only now he realized what he did wrong. The hero stood in the shadow of the bars, his gaze cold and distant. He turned to Kian without raising his head, as if he didn't find any sense in it. His order was clear and firm. Don't let Evriel near him when she woke up. This decision was not easy for him, but he knew it would be better this way. His fist clenched nervously in his hand, hiding his true feelings. Brontes lay exhausted on the cold floor. His breathing hoarse, the laws of the Empire inexorably determined his fate. He must stand trial for his actions. His family would not escape the consequences. They would all be sent into exile. Thoughts of the inevitable retribution did not give him peace, and the gravity of his situation pressed on him more and more, turning the last moments into torment. Kian slowly moves away from the door, silently giving orders. He orders not to let Evriel in. As soon as she regains consciousness, there is alienation and hidden determination in his voice. Thoughts about the consequences of what happened do not give him peace, but he does not show it to others in his soul. He understands that this is the only right way out. Although he does not fully agree with this decision, the girl wrapped in a red blanket sits on the floor. Her gaze is anxious, but she tries to hold on. She looks at Lily, who is sobbing, and tries to cheer her up, a soft timbre, full of care sounds in the silence. She does not need to cry. She should not be so upset. The girl looks back with big eyes. Her heart is squeezed with worries, but the words cause a feeling of relief in her. The maid bows her head and covers her face with her hands, unable to hold back her tears. She sobs quietly, thinking about everything that happened. Her voice sounds grateful for the rescue, but the pain of what she experienced is still too fresh. The little girl cannot hold back her emotions. When she saw that her mistress had woken up, tears rolled down on their own without her will. The man dressed in an elegant green suit with gold details slightly bowed his head, looking at the lady with restraint. Sincere concern can be heard. He asks a question, trying to understand if everything is okay. She, having briefly and coldly answered no, tries to hide her true emotions, although the feeling of chills still disturbs her body. After she picked up the thing, a strange feeling swept over her body. The mana emanating from the object caused a chill, as if cold waves were rolling across her skin. She lightly pressed her hands to her chest, trying to sort out her feelings, as she stood in the middle of a winter landscape, where everything around her seemed foreign and mysterious. Evriel thought with a little sadness about how owning the winter branch affected her body. The memories of recent events made her heart clench, but she gathered her will into a fist. Now she thought that she was fine, especially in comparison to recent difficulties. Her gaze was full of determination, despite the cold and pain that she overcame. Lily sat opposite Every. Her gaze was filled with anxiety that she tried to hide. She didn't want to think about what lay ahead, but she couldn't help but mention that the one who had done the harm was now locked up and awaiting trial. She held a cup of water in her hands, which she held out to the lady, trying to calm her down. Solgren took the water without looking away and sighed heavily. The eyes were softly glowing, and her face was slightly tired. The conference was over, and Lily advised the lady to just rest. Evriel winked at Lily with a playful expression, trying to hide her tension, and took a small sip, enjoying the short moment of peace. The woman barely touched her cup, but a thought flashed through her mind. Something was wrong. The annual meeting had never ended so quickly. Lily and Aiden stood next to her, both looking worried, the man raising the question, wondering if the meeting had ended too soon. Their eyes met, and something disquieting hung in the air. Although the words had not yet been spoken, the lady slowly opened her eyes, her body weak and her mind clouded. Aiden stood by her bed, calm but serious, as he informed her that she had been unconscious for 3 days. His words about the meeting being ended on an emergency basis yesterday did not immediately register. The tension in the room was something more than just the end of the meeting. Uriel is surprised to realize that she has slept for 3 days. She could not believe it, and in confusion raises the cup to her lips, trying to comprehend what happened. Thoughts of Brontes, who once dreamed of a complete change of power, are still spinning in her head, and her anxiety intensifies. Her violet eyes are full of questions, but she tries to stay collected, not showing her anxiety to those around her. There were too many memories in her head about what had happened to Brontes, reminding her that he had been planning all these murders for a long time. Thoughts were spinning in her head about how many more people had become victims of his insidious plans. Her hand was squeezing the weapon, and her heart was beating faster and faster, ready for the decisive step. The mistress suddenly stood up from the bed, her gaze full of determination, not yet fully recovered. She is rushing somewhere, as if she has no time left to rest. The maid's voice behind her, full of concern, calls her to stop, but this does not stop her. Lily screams in panic that she cannot move while she has not yet recovered, but the mistress is already running out of the room. A girl in a white dress with a blue bow on her head resolutely walks forward, saying that she needs to see her father. Determination is red in her eyes, but also fear at the same time, as if she understands that it may not be so easy. A man with a stern expression on his face, and a cold answer stands in front of her. No, his words cut the air, depriving her of her last hope. The heroine, with a confused expression on her face, throws up her hand and says in panic, "Why? How is this possible?" Her face reflecting a mixture of confusion and anxiety. The man standing in front of her remains calm and explains in an even voice that his lordship is currently resting. The words fill the silence of the room, and all eyes are glued to her reaction. The girl touches her forehead faintly, as if trying to clear her thoughts. She remembers the fragility of her father, with a hint of regret and anxiety. She realizes that she has completely forgotten about it. Memories of the dream where he appeared return, causing a vague feeling in her soul, as if something has slipped away. Her gaze becomes thoughtful, and questions about the reality of these visions rush through her head. The girl with big lilac eyes looks up with slight despair, as if looking for an opportunity to change a decision already made by someone important to her. She presses her hands to her chest, hoping for at least a short meeting. Her thoughts are filled with only one desire: to ask an important question that haunts her. She is ready to bargain even for a few minutes to hear the answer. Kian stands in front of the door with a serious face and tired eyes. His posture calm, but determined, he coldly refuses access, emphasizing that he has been ordered not to let anyone in. There is no doubt inside him. He must follow orders, despite all requests. The answer is final, and no amount of persuasion will change his mind. A little girl with shining, hopeful eyes looks at the man imploringly. Her voice trembling with excitement, she timidly asks if it is possible to see her father for at least a minute. But the man calmly refuses, emphasizing that his order does not allow him to violate the order. In despair, the girl asks for at least 30 seconds, but his face remains cold and unyielding. Rusher drops to one knee in front of the girl, trying to explain the situation, his voice soft but firm. He can't open the door at her request. His lordship's orders are above everything, even his personal beliefs. The Duchess looks up at him, her eyes filled with pleading, but she understands that it is impossible to change anything now. The little girl, with despair in her eyes, taps her foot on the floor, expressing her indignation. She barely holds back tears, talking about how much she wants to see her father. Her voice is full of emotion, almost trembling with excitement and resentment. No one understands why her simple wish seems so impossible to fulfill, because she only wants. The man looks at the whims of the little girl with a barely restrained smile. His gaze is softened, and he seems to be amused by her outburst of emotions. A thought flashes through his head: how an adult girl who usually behaves so responsibly can now be capricious like a child. He cannot resist the comparison. She is just like a little one. The girl suddenly notices a wound on Kian's chin. Her gaze becomes concerned. She carefully notes this fact out loud. Her eyes widen slightly in surprise. The man smiles lightly in response, as if he does not attach any importance to this, and explains that he scratched himself with an ordinary paper knife. Looking at the man with concern, the beauty feels guilty for his wound. She quietly asks if he is in pain, and her eyes fill with sympathy. Kian smiles slightly, trying to calm her down, and says that it is nothing compared to her injuries. Despite the pain, he makes it clear that he cares more about her suffering than his own. The girl quietly watches the boy, thinking that even he can make mistakes. Two adults stand in front of her discussing her condition. The man emphasizes that her recovery is now the most important thing. There is concern in his words, but also sternness, indicating the importance of caring for her health. The body suddenly shuddered, the heroine feeling the touch of hands that carefully held her by the shoulders. She looked back and met the gaze of the maid, who calmly confirmed Kian's words. Her voice was quiet but insistent. She really needed to eat. The girl frowned slightly, realizing that caring for her was important to everyone around her. The Duchess tugs fearfully at Belgren's dress, trying to hold her back, as if hoping that time will slow down. Her thoughts are confused inside. She believes that she is not good enough, that her father still does not allow her to fully reveal her abilities. Despite all her efforts, feelings are mixed with the desire to prove her strength, but this only makes it harder. Lily looks ahead thoughtfully, wondering if perhaps her father is too ill to worry about her, her large, worried eyes reflecting her doubts. But she decides to take action, clenching her fists. She says that she will quickly return to tell her father something important. Determination is heard in her voice, even if there are still doubts and fears inside. Kian stands before his mistress, hands behind his back, his voice clear and confident, as he reports that after the criminals were moved to Albion, they pretended to be trying to get into the Supreme Court. The mistress' face is emotionless, as she simply says, "Okay," accepting the information with composure, as if she was already used to such news. Rasher stands next to the bed, where his master sits, wrapped in blue blankets. His voice is concerned. When he asks about the state of the wound, the master answers, with a slight smile, that it is hardly a wound, and is surprised that Kian is worried about him. Their exchange is brief, but there is something more to it, a hidden affection that does not require extra words. The man stands in a dimly lit room, his figure slightly standing out against the wall, portraits hanging in front of him, and symbols surrounding them. This place belongs to the Secret Security Service of Duke Solgren. Officially, Kian is his assistant, but his real occupation is hidden from many. He is a member of an elite secret squad that ensures the safety of the duchy, and this mission of his is much more important than all the others. The blonde looked thoughtfully into the distance. His eyes were full of doubts, but his face remained imperturbable. He knew that there was a difficult decision ahead. Who else from their circle deserved trust in this situation? They needed to gather the best knights, those who were able to protect every. He thought about who could be trusted with this mission, because their future depended on it. Kian listened attentively. His head bowed, his gaze focused, and his lips tightly pressed together. He finally understood the importance of the upcoming mission, and calmly agreed to the need for immediate departure, placing his hand on his chest. He confirmed his decision as a sign of respect, preparing for the mission without hesitation. He knew that he had to act quickly to complete the task entrusted to him. The blond man lying on the bed smiles wearily, as if trying to comprehend what is happening around him. His breathing is intermittent, and weakness covers his body, but there is a hint of humility in his eyes. There is an hourglass on the table next to him, and time is inexorably flowing through the sand, reminding him of the inevitability. It is a symbol that the decision has already been made, and soon everything will change. His weakened body seemed to merge with the darkness of the room. Time dragged on painfully slowly, and the hourglass next to him reminded him of his inexorable run. He realized that the symptoms were only getting worse. The pain was becoming part of his reality. Fear settled deep in his soul. At this rate, he could turn into a monster, and this worries him the most. A heavy thought pierces his consciousness, as if the shadows of the past loom over every moment, an hourglass silently counting down the time that is slipping away too quickly. He is afraid that he will soon go completely mad, plunging into chaos where he will no longer be able to distinguish who is friend and who is foe. This fear poisons his mind, increasing despair and isolation. A small figure stands in front of the massive doors, her voice quietly carried in the air. She assures that everything is fine with her. She is cared for and protected. The words sound not only calm, but also a desire to dispel other people's worries. The request not to get sick sounds sincere, as if she is afraid that something will happen to her father and nothing will be possible to do. The girl doesn't go anywhere. Her hand is pressed tightly to her chest, as if trying to hold on to her emotions. Her voice sounds with trepidation and care when she talks about how important the one behind the door is to her. She whispers a wish for him to get well and stay next to her. Her eyes are filled with quiet hope and tenderness. Pressing her hands to her chest, the beauty thoughtfully looked into the void, her thoughts swirling around the question. Did her father hear her words? Concern flashed in her eyes when she remembered how she screamed through the crack in the door, trying to knock on his door, but doubt arose in her heart. Maybe her voice remained unheard, dissolving into the silence. The character slowly reaches out to the vase. Her thoughts full of doubts, she is not sure whether to go and ask for what she has been thinking about for so long. Her fingers touch the cool surface when Lily notices her intention. The girl turns around, deciding to go to her father. But at that moment, their conversation is interrupted by the sudden appearance of a man, and the atmosphere instantly changes. Kian stood at the head of the group of men, confidently looking at the little girl in front of him. They came as soon as they heard that she had regained consciousness. The concern in his voice was sincere. He was interested in her health. While the other men watched with restraint, the beauty was puzzled, not expecting to see all these people. Surprisedly said the main character, "Why are they all here?" Her gaze was full of confusion. Kian looked at his mistress with restraint, trying to find his words. His voice was calm, but there was tension in it. He began to explain what happened while she was unconscious. The conference ended earlier than planned, but the vassals remained in the manor to conduct an investigation. This message seemed to require special care so as not to alarm her. While Brontes was plotting and trying to implement his plot, the truth was slowly coming to the surface. He was embezzling large sums from the Solgren's family budget under the guise of allegedly running a business. His face was smug, but those around him were beginning to guess his true intentions. The coins circling around him symbolized his greed and thirst for power. The maid in a black uniform, with her gaze downcast, she asks her question with doubt. How is it possible that the Duchess was able to suppress the Brontes rebellion with the help of the branch? It seems almost unreal. The maid, without looking up, tries to explain what is happening. Her voice trembles, and she gesticulates excitedly, describing strange events. The whole room was covered in snow, and it was hard for her to believe what was happening. The other people gathered, look at her with confusion, and one of them clarifies. There were at least a dozen people there, surrounded by this inexplicable cold. Rumors of what happened spread with incredible speed. Surprised and worried servants talk among themselves. One of them, clearly amazed, asks again, "Really?" So many another servant exclaims that he heard how she used her powerful energy to defeat a whole crowd of murderers. This event left everyone in shock, and gave rise to countless conversations and guesses. The little heroine reflects with surprise on the fact that now everyone knows about her feat. She defeated the rebels with the help of the Winter Branch, and now rumors about this have spread throughout the castle. Her face shines with pride. But at the same time, a slight uncertainty shines through in her eyes. Is it really true that they lost consciousness from her power? She is trying to comprehend what happened. The beauty stands in deep thought, her eyes full of determination. She tries to convince herself that everything is going well, that she has the strength to cope with the task at hand. Her thoughts are focused on one thing: to prove that she is able to control the artifact, clenching her hand into a fist. She gives herself confidence, despite the internal doubts that flicker in her mind. The man with a respectful expression on his face addresses the Duchess, his gaze focused on her. He leans forward slightly, as if emphasizing his request for attention. The little girl, a little embarrassed by his sudden address, listens attentively, her large eyes expressing curiosity and slight uncertainty. The question hangs in the air, waiting for her answer. The girl stares ahead, her huge purple eyes full of thoughtfulness. She feels herself under close observation and begins to suspect that the person who came wants to check the truth of the rumors about her. Excitement fills her, because this person can judge how useful she is and what dark traits he will notice. She feels that her nature may become obvious to everyone. The girl stands with her head held high, her face adorned with a light, contented smile. In her thoughts, she tries to understand the motives of what is happening. She is concerned that everyone came to find out how she dealt with the branch. But for her, it seems ridiculous. Thinking about her helplessness fills her with slight irritation. The Duchess stands in front of a group of people, with a cold gaze surrounded by several servants. One of the men is confused, trying to understand what is being said, but her answer is merciless. He himself once called her incomplete Solgren, not considering her worthy. Now that she has regained her strength, his previous words reveal his hypocrisy. The old man nervously justifies himself, spreading his hands as if trying to explain his actions, his voice trembling when he says that he does everything solely for the Solgren's family. His face reflects fear of what can no longer be justified. The lie hidden behind these words is felt in every gesture, but he continues, hoping to convince those around him of his devotion. She closed her eyes, disappointment and sadness mixed on her face. Her quiet but firm voice expressed her feelings as if she was thinking out loud, not understanding how good intentions could lead to such a nickname. There was bitterness in her words, as if she had long ago realized that excuses and promises no longer made sense. The Duchess looks at the man standing in front of her. With a bright smile, she speaks with ease and joy, like a weightless flower, advising him to go and apologize to the Duke. Her words sound insistent, but at the same time good-natured. Her gaze shines with inner confidence and calm, as if she knows for sure that her advice is the only right decision in this situation. A man with a serious expression looking straight ahead says that vile actions should be apologized for. You can hear severity and inexorability a little further. Another man adds with a smile that the Duchess, despite her age, understands more than adults. This comment sounds with a slight mockery, but there is a hidden truth in it that is difficult to ignore. The little Duchess, with a serious but gentle expression, asks everyone not to quarrel. Her huge violet eyes look at the assembled group with kindness and determination. The adult standing next to her with restraint suggests continuing the conversation in the living room, his face stern and calm, and behind him stands a group of people ready to follow his suggestion. The man in the scarlet waistcoat with gold patterns looks at the little Duchess with slight concern. There is relief in his voice, because he is glad that she has finally woken up. He politely asks about her well-being. His eyes reflect respect and some concern. The beauty is still silent, thinking about how to respond to the concern shown. The girl looked at her interlocutor with a slight smile, answering the question about her health, briefly and confidently. Not bad, but another idea flashed through her thoughts. One believed that these people should be looked at more closely, with subsequent determination. She thought about the future of her family, about the fact that she needed loyal people, ready to build a wonderful future. There was silence in the room, broken only by quiet questions. One of those gathered, glancing towards the table, asked what was there in response. She was told that these were gifts with wishes for a speedy recovery. Bright boxes, with gifts lay in neat rows, each of them symbolized the attention and care of people who were sincerely worried about the health of the Duchess. In the living room, a scene full of awkwardness unfolded at the table. The girl exclaimed in embarrassment, not understanding why she was again being reminded of her age. A protest flashed through her thoughts. She was already 14. In another part of the room, a little girl sitting among the guests looked around nervously, and one of the men turned to her with a request to do something to defuse the situation. A man dressed in a formal red suit with gold trim sits with his head bowed intently, telling the Duchess that he has something important. He wants to give her personally, his gaze intense, as if there is more to the offer than just a gift. Around him are numerous gifts, neatly placed in boxes with bright ribbons. On the table in front of the Duchess lies a dagger with an exquisite blade decorated with a pattern on the background of a complex ornament. The heroine looks at it in surprise, realizing that this is not just a gift. The voice explains to her that this weapon is intended for self-defense, but also warns her the possession of such a dagger requires skills without which its use can be dangerous. The beauty, with a thoughtful look, tightly clutches the dagger in her hands. She understands that this is not just a gift. It is engraved with the family crest, which symbolizes loyalty and devotion. It seems to her that Bibane believes that she does not understand the meaning of this gesture, but the weapon with the crest has a much deeper meaning for her than one can imagine. The lady sat in a chair by the fireplace. It seemed she was pondering the latest events. Her gaze was focused, but fatigue showed through in every movement. The servants, realizing that she needed rest, suggested that she leave slowly getting up. They promised to return later. The room was filled with the warmth of the fire, creating a contrast with the coldness of her thoughts. Going somewhere into the distance. The head of the May family, Isis, always inspired fear in her with her menacing appearance. She clasped her hands in indecision, realizing that she never dared to speak to her grandmother directly. The memory of her respectful gaze involuntarily caused a shudder, but at the same time, it reminded her of the importance of tradition and family, which the old woman tirelessly maintained. She sat on a large chair staring into space, her violet eyes full of doubt, and thought about how she didn't live up to her grandmother's expectations and constantly felt unworthy. Her mother had left her life. Her heart was sinking with fear of losing someone else close to her. Her strength was leaving her body, but she couldn't stop thinking about it. Isis May, with a restrained bow of her head, makes her wish with a slight bow, her voice calm, but her eyes tense. She wishes the Duchess a good peaceful day under the protection of fate, her words accompanied by deep respect, as if there was something more behind them than a simple formality. The Duchess is in a panic. Her eyes are wide and her face is filled with despair. She is afraid that if her grandmother leaves, she will never have a chance to talk to her again. These thoughts are taking over her. She feels like the opportunity is slipping away from her hands, and the fear of losing this moment is pressing harder and harder, making her heart beat faster. The lady tries to reach out to her grandmother. Fear and excitement overwhelm her. She remembers how she used to want to ask her grandmother about her mother, but never dared now. This opportunity is slipping away. She is in despair, almost screaming, asking her grandmother to stop feeling how the last chance is slipping through her fingers. The Duchess froze, the words stuck in her throat like a barrier that she could not overcome. She wanted to say something, but she could not find the right words, and her thoughts were confused in her head. The gaze of gray eyes pierced her, and the feeling of helplessness grew. Nothing came to mind, and confusion fettered her completely, leaving only a painful silence. Isis, with a slight smile on her face, dropped to one knee in front of the little Duchess, holding her hands tightly, her eyes full of relief and her voice filled with genuine happiness. She quietly says how happy she is to see that the Duchess is okay. A warm atmosphere surrounds them. The golden light plays on the walls, reflecting the quiet joy and peace of this moment. The blonde gently squeezes her grandmother's hand, feeling the warmth that brings her peace. The excitement in her voice is barely noticeable, but the sincere joy in her eyes betrays her emotions. Isis, looking at her with a warm smile, nods softly, Experiencing the same feelings, their silent understanding fills the room with warmth, as if this is a moment that both have been waiting for a long time. May, bowing her head, mutters something quietly, calling her words senile nonsense. Despite her humility, her eyes show concern and sadness. The little Duchess looks at her with concern, and as if feeling the full weight of the moment, steps back. Bowing in respect, she does not know what else to say, but her gesture speaks for itself. She cares. Several days passed, and rumors about the fate of Brontes spread throughout the north. Quickly acquiring new details, people whispered about the tragic accident in which he was supposedly killed among the majestic walls of the castle. The conversations did not cease. Some shared this news with anxiety, and some with relief. A shadow of uncertainty still hovered over the palace. Two maids were talking quietly, their voices almost drowned out by the silence of the majestic castle. One of them was saying, with alarm, that the carriage had fallen into the canyon and Bronte's body had never been found. She added that, according to rumors, the guards and the coachman had survived. The rumors were spreading, causing more and more questions. The little Duchess stood at the railing, thoughtfully, looking into the distance. Her gaze was focused, and her thoughts flowed smoothly. The conversation of two servants nearby riveted her attention. They were talking about the fact that Brontes did not fall by accident. Someone dealt with him. She thought about this without showing her guesses on her face, but she clearly understood more than others. The Emperor sat in his majesty, radiating a cold detachment. The character's thoughts wandered. If it were his business, he would get rid of not only Brontes, but also everyone who could become a threat. The coachman and the guard's doubts awakened in him a sense of danger, but there was no answer yet. An alarming question slipped through his thoughts. Was someone else involved in this? The person shrouded in light seemed to rest in the hands of an unknown force emanating from the goddess Shea. The thoughts became increasingly unclear. Was this really divine intervention, or someone skillfully disguised their actions as divine punishment? The answers were drowned in light. The blonde rolled her eyes, her whole appearance showing irritation. She quietly grumbles that it is none of her business, completely refusing to interfere. Her gaze becomes more serious when her thoughts begin to wander in another direction. There are more important things to worry about. Her tone changes to focused and thoughtful. The Duchess looked at Kian with hope in her eyes. Her small hands folded at her chest, her large violet eyes shining a request hidden behind her soft voice. She quietly asked if it was possible to see Dad today, her voice sounding with a hint of anxiety and excitement. The girl stood expectantly, looking hopefully at the man in front of her, her eyes full of excitement, as if begging for a meeting with her father. But his answer was firm and disappointing. Sorry, but no, for the past week since her awakening, her father has not come to her. Even once, she felt like thorns were growing around her heart, leaving a pain of misunderstanding and a feeling that her father was deliberately avoiding her. The question, filled with bitterness, hung in the air. The maiden, with a cold gleam in her eyes, looked away, trying to contain her emotions. Her gaze, although full of hidden pain, reflected inner disappointment and indignation. The mind tried to figure out how no one still knew the reason why the Duke's wife left the mansion, but the answer remained a mystery. The memories came back to her suddenly. Tillian had spoken of Latisse, her mother, of how she had left this house, left the mansion, a quiet, distant voice woven into the darkness of her figure, as if she were speaking of a past that had left an indelible mark on her, the horror of memories lurking in every word. And this story was only the beginning of a much darker story. The Duke's ex-wife had betrayed him, running away into the dark, cold night. With a stranger, their figures were lost in the snowy forest, but their silhouettes clearly spoke of determination and fear. Behind them was the Duke's castle, immersed in silence, but ahead of them lay an unknown path, as if this blue crystal on the snow reflected all the uncertainty of their future. In the candlelight, a woman dressed in an exquisite dress held a fan in her hands, covering part of her face with it as if hiding her intentions. She spoke of how the Solgren's family heirloom, the frost flower, was stolen. This news caused a real furor in high society, shocking everyone. Present the secrets of the Duke's past came to the surface, leaving many questions. The heroine reflects on the words of Lady Tillian. She did not believe her words. But every time her father avoided her and pushed her away, doubts arose in her soul. These thoughts seemed to poison her consciousness, gradually creeping into her heart. She again remembers how Tillian said that she and her mother were incredibly similar. These words made her think, what if it is true? The girl stands clutching the collar of her dress. Her thoughts are full of doubts and anxiety. What will happen if Tillian is right? The question worries her more and more. Her heart beats faster. She begins to tremble with worry if her father avoids her. Because she reminds him of her mother, fear paralyzes, forcing her to doubt her every step and word. The girl stood alone, trying to cope with the overwhelming feelings. Her voice, trembling with excitement, quietly says that she knows everything and can no longer hide it. Her gaze is filled with an internal struggle, but at that moment, her thoughts are suddenly interrupted. A small mouse appears on the way, who seems to greet her with his mischievous appearance. Lily and Kian are alarmed by the sudden sound that broke the silence. They ask, what is going on, with obvious concern in their voices. At that moment, a little girl with rosy cheeks peeks out from around the corner, looks at the floor, a little embarrassedly, and quietly says that there is something under her feet. The man standing at the door also looks down, slightly embarrassed. The little girl looked up, not hiding her confusion. There was a slight awkwardness in her words, as if she was afraid of her own unexpected reaction. She looked around, expecting possible consequences. Her heart beat faster, and with anxiety in her voice, she said that she thought something had happened again. Standing in the dimly lit room, the uniformed man leaned forward, with a determined expression on his face, as he gave the order, his voice full of confidence, as he asked the lordship to return to the room and rest, while the assistant, with a drooping posture, reluctantly left the scene, heading away, hiding his emotions behind a calm exterior. The girl desperately tries to hold the man back tightly, clutching his pants. Her voice trembling with panic, she can't let him go because every movement he makes away causes unbearable pain. A wordless cry breaks out from within. The man stops. His cold expression hides confusion, but her plea is too strong a blow to not react. The girl watches the man leave with anxiety. Her heart squeezes with pain. She understands that she must say something, that her silence can separate them forever. But the words get stuck in her throat. Tears themselves begin to flow down her cheeks, dripping onto the floor, as if reflecting her confusion and despair. She needs to say so much, but she cannot find the right words. Virgo, holding back her tears with all her might, clings to the man, as if afraid that he will disappear again. She sobs quietly, trying to say how long she has been waiting for this meeting. The words are filled with despair. She admits that she was scared being alone, and begs not to leave her. In every gesture, one can feel the fear of losing the most important thing to which she is so attached. No longer holding back her emotions, the little girl looks straight into the eyes of the man who is kneeling in front of her and whispers with resentment that he is very bad and that she hates him. Pain and disappointment can be heard in her words, as if she cannot understand why she was hurt so much. Her body trembles, tears well up in her eyes, and soon she bursts into tears, unable to hide her despair any longer. The man looks away, his gaze filled with longing and inner pain. A question sounds in his head that seems to haunt him. Why can one love such an insignificant father? He is immersed in thought. His face expresses deep sadness and self-flagellation, as if not finding answers. He continues to torment himself with doubts, not seeing a way to make amends for his guilt. The maid stands before him, her face expressing excitement, but she speaks confidently. He himself asked this question, and now she gives an answer that seems to cut his heart. The mistress loves him with all her heart as he loves her. These words resonate in him, causing a feeling of guilt and longing. Because the love in question seems to him something unattainable, the blond man thought trying to find answers to questions that were important to him. He reasoned with cold calm that the love of parents for children and vice versa is natural. Parents love their children, and children in turn love their parents. His gaze seemed indifferent, but his words betrayed internal tension. A servant nearby humbly asked the master to spend more time with the little mistress, begging for understanding. He sat there staring thoughtfully into the distance, letting his thoughts drift into the silence. His gaze empty, as if he was trying to understand something, but couldn't find the answers. With a heavy sigh, he said to himself that it would be great if he could. But his words seemed to echo the inner struggle that no one could see hidden behind his outer calm. The girl with long blonde hair sighed heavily, her shoulders drooping, her eyes full of regret. She admitted it. A complete failure. Soon she found herself on the floor, replaying her mistakes in her head. Her heart aching with shame, she insulted her father, burst into tears, hugged him, and couldn't even say what she really wanted. Sitting on the bed and hugging the pillow, the beauty thoughtfully looked into the void. She really believed that her father had changed because of her, that she was the reason for his coldness and distance. But the feeling of uncertainty did not leave her. Something told her that it was not only about her, and this fear gradually enveloped her mind. Her father stood in front of her, puzzled, obviously trying to hide something important. It was clear from his reaction that it was not about her screaming, but he could not explain. The girl raised her head and looked at him carefully, not understanding why her father was so scared. Perhaps everything was much more complicated than it seemed to her, and her father struggled with internal doubts, not finding words. Tears glistened in her eyes when she thought that her father was still worried about her. But then indignation boiled up in her. If he was worried, then why was he avoiding her? Anger and disappointment filled her little heart. She called him a fool, not understanding why her father did not want to meet her. If he was so worried, these conflicting feelings did not give her peace. Lying on the bed, she felt a heavy sense of guilt fill her heart. The thought that perhaps she was the fool did not leave her. Her own actions running away, leaving her father alone, now seemed like a mistake. If she had not run away, everything could have been different. This thought tormented her, making her feel even worse. The girl jumped up from her bed, trying to calm her panic. Only one thought was spinning in her head. Her father's health was the most important thing. Now she firmly decided that she had to do everything possible to get him out of bed. Excitement filled her heart, but she knew that she could not give up, even if it was difficult. Sitting at the table, she clutched the pen in her hand, thoughts of her emotions choking her, not allowing her to say a word, taking over her mind. But tears are no excuse for inaction. She decided if it is impossible to say out loud, then perhaps it is better to write everything that has been bothering her heart for so long. Writing will become her voice when words refuse to come out. Thoughts began to clear up, and the first decision was to lock the door to the bedroom. Everything that could happen behind these doors seemed unpredictable to her. She tried to control at least this small part of her life. Looking at the window, she reminded herself, half an hour of sunlight a day and 2 walks. Her new regime. She realizes that she can't hesitate. A plan appears in her head, but there is a weak point in it. She can't trust Keanu if she tells him this. He will surely tell her father everything. The girl begins to run quickly. Her small feet silently touch the floor. She is afraid, but determination leads her forward, and she hopes for the best solution. They stand in the hallway together. The man and the maid are talking, unaware that a little girl is watching them. He notices with a smile that a mouse is wandering around the mansion, hinting at her presence. But she freezes, holding her breath, feeling her heart squeeze with fear because she cannot be noticed. A little girl peeks out cautiously from around the corner, listening to the conversation. Her thoughts preoccupied with the fact that the house is catastrophically short of employees, and nothing can be done about it. Even the owner, wearily thinking about the problems with hiring and payment, half-jokingly remarks that soon they will have to get a cat to solve the problem with mice. The little girl looks forward with a serious look, her violet eyes reflecting worries. Her head is spinning with anxious thoughts. It is obvious that the Solgren's family is in the worst situation. Her mind is busy thinking about the difficulties hanging over the house, which makes her feel the burden of responsibility for the future of the family. Vast territories in the north belong to this family, but more and more financial difficulties begin to threaten their holdings. Problems with transportation and a harsh climate make farming difficult. A cart with workers slowly descends the slope, carrying a rare harvest. The future of these lands is increasingly clouded by uncertainty and anxiety about how to cope with difficulties. Most of the mines that provide income to the family are under the control of the imperial family, which complicates matters. They are managed by the emperor's half-brother, whose influence extends far and wide. This state of affairs creates even more uncertainty because he can intervene at any time and change the fate of their possessions, increasing anxiety about the future. The thoughts were filled with anxiety. If an avalanche hit this winter, the consequences would be catastrophic. Human casualties would be inevitable, the roads would freeze, and the North would be completely cut off from the outside world until the arrival of spring. This thought was pressing, creating a sense of imminent danger hanging over the entire region. Dark shadows fall upon the majestic building, reflecting gloomy thoughts about the future. The family's financial situation is inexorably worsening, and this seems an inevitable outcome. The palace stands gloomy, like a symbol of impending disasters that are getting closer every day. An oppressive anxiety hangs in the air, and the prospects become increasingly gloomy. The maiden looked ahead, her eyes full of determination and slight anxiety. Thoughts about the future did not leave her. She realized that the family's financial difficulties could only be prevented in one way to do this. She needed to master the art of managing the winter branch time was against her, but she knew the fate of the family was in her hands. The main character also remained standing behind the wall. She understands that her father will never allow her to do what she has planned, and this makes her even sadder. Her thoughts were immersed in anxiety, realizing the inevitable resistance. Belgren watching calmly offers a solution. She will make sure that the servants clean more often. Frowning slightly, the young man turns his attention to his interlocutor and suddenly asks what she was doing. The embarrassed girl, her eyes wide in surprise, answers with noticeable panic that she ended up in the bathroom by accident. Her confusion betrays her lack of understanding of what is happening, which only adds to the comicality of the situation. Kian, slightly bowing his head confidently, answers the question of how he learned the truth. He calmly states that being a creature of another race, nothing can escape his attention. The beauty listens to him, attentively surprised at how easily he guessed embarrassment gives way to a smile when she agrees with his words. Because all this is really true. The girl happily hands Belgren a small object, asking him to give it to her father. Her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. She is sure that it is important. Kian looks at her with curiosity and slight bewilderment, asking what this thing is. He bows his head, trying to understand the meaning of this order, but is ready to fulfill the request. The little lady handed over the letter, holding it carefully in her hands, and asked Kian to take it to his father, when the man, with slight surprise in his voice, asked what kind of letter it was. She smiled naively and replied that he should not read it, but simply pass it on. The beauty, despite the seriousness of the situation, could not help but smile slightly, expecting the gray-haired man to fulfill her request without unnecessary questions. Rasher slowly approached the massive door, his hand on the handle as if he was going to open it. A girl remained behind him, curiously watching his every move. She imagined what his face would look like if the door actually opened. This thought caused her to smile slightly, because she already expected it to be funny, adding a little irony to the moment. The beauty thoughtfully puts her hand to her forehead, as if trying to find a way out of the situation. A thought flashes through her head. After all, there is nothing strange in a request to go out into the fresh air for the sake of health. She sincerely hopes that they will help her. Understanding that with the state of his heart, it is impossible to delay, her gaze is lowered, expressing slight fatigue, but inside her there is a burning desire to help. The main character looks up with an anxious but determined expression, her head filled with thoughts about the future as she wonders, what if I solve the family's financial situation? At this moment, her mind is filled with uncertainty, but deep down, there is a growing hope that she can find a solution. A gentle hand squeezes someone else's hand, as if she is looking for support to take an important step. It is clear that in order to confront the emperor, it is necessary to build a clear plan of action. The boy realizes that the first step must necessarily be to strengthen power in their territories. Without this, further struggle will be useless. He is determined to achieve the best result in order to ensure success. In addition, she understands that in the event of an unexpected outbreak of war, food supplies will be extremely necessary. It is important to take care of this in advance. So now in this situation, funds become the most important thing. The girl slowly walks down the corridor, thinking about the current problems. First, they need to earn money. She understands that their house needs urgent repairs because the building is starting to collapse. It also becomes clear to her that one doctor is not enough for her father. It is necessary to find someone else who can help improve his condition. With a serious expression on her face, she thinks about the financial situation. She needs to know what the debts are in their territories, and she understands that the key to solving the problem may be in her father's office. Perhaps all the financial reports are stored there that will help clarify the situation and find a way out. The girl anxiously thinks about whether she will be able to ask Keon to show her the financial reports. She is almost sure that he will refuse, because they contain records of a recent incident. Confusion and fear make her think about what to do next, because she understands that this is important information for saving their possessions. Clenching her hand resolutely, the little girl realized that she couldn't just give up. A desire to do something more flashed in her eyes. Despite all the obstacles, she firmly decided that she would find a moment when Kiana was not around to carry out her plan. Her determination strengthened, and she was ready to take action for the future of her family. In a spacious living room, two men sit at a massive table, surrounded by luxurious interiors. One of them, concentrated, asked about the purpose of the visit, carefully studying his interlocutor, Mr. Ross. Their conversation, imbued with formality, indicates the importance of the meeting, where every detail matters, and the outcome of their conversation can affect further events. Rickson, the head of the northern branch of the Fourth Imperial Trading Firm, looks forward with confidence and calm, speaking about his intention to speed up the repayment of the debt. His gray hair and formal suit emphasize solidity and experience. He clearly knows what he wants, and his goals are crystal clear. His gaze is focused. The gesture of his hand adds weight to his words. The man with a stern expression looks at his interlocutor attentively. His gaze is penetrating, as if trying to guess the guest's true intentions. He also notes that the visit was unannounced, which makes him suspicious. Uttering his question, he clearly seeks to find out the real reason for the visit, preparing for any possible scenarios. The old man looks ahead with a serious expression, his eyes hidden behind his glasses, thoughts pulsating in his head. He considers that the words he just spoke could be careless for the one who helped destroy the estate. There is a heaviness in his voice when he mentions the incident with the Brontes family, knowing that this is the beginning of a more serious conversation. After his death, many events began to unfold rapidly. Several Solgren's businesses that had once prospered under his management began to lose their stability. Financial instability became more and more noticeable, and in the background, only scattered documents and coins could be seen, symbolizing chaos and decay. Ross had invested heavily in Brontes's beetroot project, hoping for a steady profit. But as the situation began to deteriorate, he could no longer simply watch from the sidelines, and the economic difficulties associated with the project began to mount, threatening the entire system in which his efforts and capital had been invested. The character watches with bewilderment the old man who suddenly insists on speeding up the repayment of debts. He could not have imagined that this topic would be the motive for his visit. Reasoning to himself, he notes that growing beets is only possible in the spring, and does not understand why he should rush with this issue now, when the right time for planting has not yet arrived. Rickson rises heavily from the table, trying to explain the need to speed up the repayment of debts. He knows that Bronte's shop will sell beets until August next year, and it was for this profit that they invested in the project. But something worries him, and he is not sure that things will go as planned. The man carefully placed his hand on the stack of documents, moving them closer to his interlocutor. His calm voice indicated the importance of the papers he was offering. He said that it would be much easier if he checked all the information himself. It was clear that words might not convey the whole essence of the situation, and only facts on paper could finally clarify the picture. Now, taking the paper, Kian is deep in thought. He was handed a special contract, the text of which makes him doubt. His gaze is focused, and he understands that this could be something serious. He turns the sheet and reads, "If the Brontes business collapses, the repayment date of the debt will be changed by the investor Ross." Every line on the document sounded like a trick, and now he had an important choice. Rickson, leaning on the chair, explains the situation with cold calm, his voice sounding firm as he reminds them that his company has invested a huge amount of money in this project, and the loss of such capital is unacceptable for the Fourth Imperial Trading Company. It is important for him to save the company's face, and this becomes a priority in their future actions. In the silence of the spacious room, a fireplace burns, filling it with soft light. The phrase spoken with notes of cold calculation sounds like a warning. An important guest will arrive in March next year, and the decision of the issue must be made without mistakes. He makes it clear that it will be better for everyone if everything is decided correctly and on time, hinting at the possible consequences of mistakes. The Duchess suddenly flinches when she hears words that are incomprehensible to her. Her hands rise in confusion, and her face reflects surprise and anxiety. She tries to comprehend what is happening. A piercing question sounds in her thoughts. What is he talking about? The situation clearly goes beyond her expectations, making her nervous. The beauty was looking for an opportunity to enter the office, planning every step. Suddenly, noticing Kian leading the guest into the living room, she realized that this was her chance. Her heart began to beat faster. Right now was the right moment to sneak in unnoticed. Her decision was ripe. She needed to take advantage of the opportunity, while Rasher's attention was focused on the guest. The lady quickly realized that the moment for action had come unexpectedly quickly, but her thoughts were suddenly interrupted when she turned her attention to Kian. Why did he look so tense? His frown and concentrated expression made her question. Now her determination was mixed with a slight anxiety, because something was clearly bothering Kian. She leaned carefully against the wall of the next room, hoping to overhear the conversation. Fortunately, no one noticed her presence. The fireplace blocked the sounds from other rooms, but one knocked-out brick created a weak sound bridge. She knew that this small defect would help her hear everything that was happening in the room. The main character stood on the balcony, deep in thought. Brontes had borrowed money, counting on future sales of beets. But the deadline for repaying the debt, until March, worried. Her plans were spinning in her head on how to find a way out of the situation, because there was less and less time left. Her gaze was focused, tension was growing inside. Her eyes were shining from the thoughts that were rushing through her, and they looked away. Everything was happening too quickly. She knew that beets were not planted before May, which meant that there was even less time left than she had expected. Her thoughts continued to spin, building possible solutions, but anxiety had already taken root in her mind. Her thoughts were plunging into the past memories that she had heard before the rebirth surfaced. The beet planting project had failed, the disease of overripeness had destroyed all plans, and the farmer stood there full of disappointment, not knowing how to cope with the failure. This experience made her think about the present, because the mistakes of the past could be repeated. She held tightly to the edge, feeling the tension seeping into her fingers. The thought that the project would inevitably bring losses ran cold through her consciousness. Her mind, assessing the risks, saw how the situation was unfolding. For the worse, each step in this direction seemed more and more risky to her, and the possible losses more and more real. The girl stood, her eyes full of worry. The realization that there were too many debts that the family would not be able to pay off haunted the main character, making her heart beat faster. It seemed to her that time was short, and she needed to act immediately. Before Kian returned, determination flashed in her eyes. She understood that this was her chance to sort everything out before it was too late. The beauty moved quickly along the corridor. Her determination grew stronger with every step. Time was against her, but she could not allow herself to stop clenching her fists. She decided to sneak into the archives and try to find countermeasures. This was her chance to fix the situation and help the family get out of the debt crisis. Opening the book, the girl could not restrain herself, and her eyes widened in shock. On the pages in front of her was a huge debt. 4 million, she could not believe her eyes. This was not just a problem, but a real disaster for her family. The situation required an immediate solution, and panic began to grow in her chest. She sat staring at the page, realizing the scale of the disaster. The family's annual income was only 1 million, but the debt was 4 times. That her eyes grew heavy with the understanding of how they would be able to get out of such a hole. Each number on the document seemed to weigh on her, emphasizing that the situation was almost hopeless. The main character leafed through the old records, relieved to know that they hadn't gone bankrupt yet. But then something made her stop when she thought about it. Her eyes widened in sudden insight, her gaze previously thoughtful and tired. now filled with concentration. A thought came out of nowhere, like the key to solving a problem that had been plaguing her for so long. Kian continues to confidently manage finances, taking the place of the sick head of the family. His decisive actions and desire to support the family business cause surprise and admiration in the girl watching him. She cannot believe in his strength and abilities, realizing how amazing a person he really is. The little girl sat on the floor among the books and reports, deep in thought. She looked at the documents with concern, calculating the amount in her thoughts flashed. By March, the Ross Company will need to return $500,000. Trying to contain the growing anxiety, she again delved into the calculations, trying to find a solution to this confusing situation. The blonde looked confidently forward, her eyes were burning with determination. Internally, she came to the conclusion that if they put in the effort, they could earn as much as they needed. There was no longer a trace of confusion on her face, only a firm intention to act and change the situation in their favor, despite all the difficulties. To the west of Belgothon, among the green hills, there was a small village called Campa. It became a refuge for poor itinerant craftsmen who began to gather there one after another. Having learned about the weak collection of taxes, craftsmen and traders flocked here, hoping for a better future, creating their own autonomy. As time went on, the small village gradually grew. The painting shows artisans passionate about their work. One creates a clay vessel, another is engaged in painting. The place became a large city through which everyone who considered himself a creator had to pass. A creative atmosphere filled the streets, turning the city into a cultural center. Not all the masters who settled in Campa were able to achieve recognition. A young man with red hair stands in front of someone clearly surprised by the unexpected visit. His face expresses confusion and bewilderment, and in his voice there is hidden anxiety. She asks why the guests came, not understanding their intentions. On the threshold of the house, the red-haired artist answers the visitor's question. The latter, standing in front of him, asks if he has come to the right place. The village of Sanfilda, the girl confirms this, slightly surprised by the unexpected visit, but trying not to show embarrassment. The light of the morning sun softly illuminates the street and their faces, creating an atmosphere of calm dialogue. The redhead modestly admits that he does not consider himself a real master. His gaze is directed to the side, and there is a slight sadness and uncertainty in his voice. He says that he is just an apprentice who has no right to be called an artist. The words reflect his doubts in his own abilities, despite the fact that he is perhaps much more talented than he thinks. He still holds the letter in his hands, his gaze directed downwards towards the envelope, which he assumes contains an important message. He is surprised by the quality of the paper, thinking out loud that this must be a letter from a rich man. But who could have sent it? Uncertainty and curiosity reflected in his eyes, making him wonder about the upcoming events. Hiding her excitement, the heroine held a letter with expensive paper in her hands. In the light of the dim lamp, his gaze lingered on the seal. A strange luxury for his usual surroundings. An inner voice suggested that the letter came from an influential person, because such paper could not belong to an ordinary person who could have sent it. The artist looked at the letter in his hands with surprise. His thoughts were racing. Strange handwriting like a child's. But at the same time, the vocabulary was clearly aristocratic. He felt a slight anxiety since it did not meet his expectations. The slight sound of rustling paper emphasized his confusion and bewilderment. In his hands sparkled an amazing material, a rare blue pigment that was used to create paints. The deep and bright color captured attention, as if piercing everything around with its purity and depth. Thoughts flashed through the artist's head. This was a valuable gift, a rarity that could rarely be found. The thing makes you be amazed, feeling a mixture of surprise and delight. Her eyes widened in surprise. She held in her hands a rare material that she had never seen before. Her head seemed to spin from the realization of the value of the pigment that was in front of him. She had never seen anything like it. Material of such a high class seemed unattainable for an ordinary artist. Her heart beat with excitement, mixed with trepidation at the opening possibilities. The red-haired girl, tearing herself away, catches up with the courier. In a hurry, her voice loudly echoes along the street, forcing him to turn around. She grabs him by the shoulder, almost breaking into a scream. Her eyes are burning with bewilderment. Where did this package come from? and her voice trembles with excitement. The courier's answer could shed light on the unexpected receipt of the mysterious pigment that so amazed him. The messenger calmly informs that the parcel arrived from the northern borders of Solgrens and was marked as something important, so they decided that everything should end exactly like this. The blonde sits by the window and watches the beautifully falling snowflakes, hoping that the parcel has already been delivered to its destination as expected. She is not going to waste time. Found exclusively in the Solgrens, the phantom stone has always been considered useless, its dull gray hue and seemingly complete lack of use making it unnoticed by most. But one talented artist saw something more in the stone. She turned it into a rare and precious material to create a unique paint. The mineral powder extracted from the ghost stone changed color after being filtered and heated, turning into a stunning phantom blue, a discovery that was a milestone in Belreute's art history, changing the world of painting and paint materials forever. The girl, with a satisfied expression on her face, slightly blushing, closed her eyes and folded her hands under her chin. Her thoughts were full of confidence. This time, she simply sped up the process, a simple movement, but how much hidden joy from a small victory in it against the background of geometric patterns, as if emphasizing her inner harmony and satisfaction with the result of her action. The blonde sat thoughtfully at the table, tiredly closing her eyes, as if immersed in deep thought in the background. She sighed heavily, realizing that it took much longer than expected. To write Lily's letter in front of her stood a beauty with a vase of flowers. Her calm face expressed concern, and the flowers in her hands filled the room with a light aroma of freshness. The main character, wrapped in a warm cloak, stands by the window, her eyes thoughtfully looking into the distance, as if she is waiting for a long-awaited letter. There is anxiety in her soul. Perhaps the answer will come after winter? She tries to calm herself down, thinking that the message will definitely arrive. But the wait has already become unbearable, and the cold of the winter air penetrating through the crack of the window only increases her anxiety. Sylvia was the one who first discovered the amazing phantom blue color that changed the course of art history. The stone from which this rare pigment was mined was valuable only to her, and she turned it into materials to create the paint that brought her recognition. The woman always had a passion for drawing, which remained with her despite the difficulties. Even without earning money on open color, she did not give up her calling and continued to devote herself to creativity, finding in it consolation and meaning in life. The beauty created her masterpiece, calling it Dawn of Campa. The painting depicting the morning city in the rays of soft light became her debut work. Every stroke conveyed deep feelings and the tender atmosphere of her native place. But despite her efforts and skill, she had to realize that the real assessment of her work was yet to come. Sylvia's happiness was short-lived. The teacher who was supposed to support her suddenly took away her right to use paint, which was everything to her. This blow was too strong for her fragile soul, and unable to cope with the cruel reality, she decided to end her life, leaving the world of her creativity forever. The blonde standing by the window looked thoughtfully into the distance. Her gaze was full of melancholy and hidden questions. The painting Dawn of Campa, which became a masterpiece forever, remained an artistic legacy. But the thought of the price at which this was achieved did not give her peace in her soul. The realization was born that behind great achievements, there is always someone's sacrifice. This time, she will save the unrecognized genius who deserves it. Solgren Jr. looked out the window thoughtfully, remembering a moment from her past life when she saw a painting that left a lasting impression on her. It was at the Empress's. And now her thoughts returned to that moment again. She wondered if she would ever be able to look at that masterpiece again, because the painting was truly unique and enchanting. The servant, immersed in her reading, suddenly raised her head. Hearing a slight rustle, her eyes widened, and she quietly asked, "Who is there?" In the corner of the room, hiding behind the window, a girl with long blonde hair froze her heartbeat faster when she realized that Lily noticed her presence. Thoughts quickly flashed through her mind. Perhaps this is a reply from Campa, or from Dad if he read my note. Her heart instantly began to beat faster. Hopes were replaced by anxiety. A sudden noise made her shudder. The stairs creaked, and the door opened with unexpected force. The woman, amazed, stopped, not daring to move, but ready to meet the one who disturbed their peace. A man in a military uniform with red hair looks around in confusion, not understanding what is happening. Someone's hand touches her shoulder, making her wonder what is going on. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, a young girl with silver hair excitedly tells the maid Belgrin that some strangers have appeared in their house. The worry is conveyed in her tone, and she waits for an answer. A maid with long blonde hair neatly braided shyly folds her hands, looking ahead. Her calm voice, breaking the silence, she reports that the Duke has ordered knights to be provided for protection. She adds with confidence that most likely these are the ones who were sent for this important task. The maiden looks forward with obvious surprise on her face, her violet eyes wide open, and her thoughts are filled with anxiety. She is confused. They already have few knights. Why should she hire them? The question worries her, because the situation seems more and more confusing, and she tries to find meaning in it. The pyramids symbolize the hierarchy, with knights at the top, demanding higher pay than the common soldiers. Below, the small figures of people inside the pyramid emphasized this difference year after year. Financial difficulties affected the army, and this is why there were so few knights in the unit. The girl stands thoughtfully, her hand on her chin, thinking about the security situation. It is obvious that the level of protection was lowered, and there were clearly not enough guards. A light knock on the door interrupts her thoughts. A polite voice makes a suggestion. "Duchess, if you do not mind, may we meet?" The blonde beauty stands thoughtfully, noticing the obvious. The level of security has clearly been reduced, and there are not enough knights. She is trying to think about what to do next. When there is a knock on the door, she is interrupted by an offer to meet, and she turns around with obvious interest. Someone's silhouette flashes in the doorway, and the girl is preparing for a new acquaintance, possibly with the defenders who were sent to her. The purple-haired knight, dressed in a white and blue uniform, drops to one knee, placing his hand over his heart in a sign of loyalty and respect. His face focused and serious as he subduedly introduces himself as Lola Clore, the leader of the Solgren's White Knights, bringing the moment of important introduction closer. The main character looks thoughtfully at Lola Clore. Remembering this name, she feels that she has heard this name somewhere before, but cannot immediately remember in what context. Her gaze is full of slight anxiety and curiosity. As if this fact could be important to her, the lady continues to stand in front of her, unaware of her inner doubts. The knights introduced at the moment when the winter cold is approaching do not inspire confidence in the heroine. She watches them carefully, hiding her excitement. Behind a mask of calm uncertainty is reflected in her eyes. Their presence seems to her more a means of observation than protection. With the thought of upcoming events, she could not get rid of suspicions. The two stand side by side, discussing what is happening. One of them, with a serious expression, notes that Mr. Chen carefully selected the staff for a reason, hinting at the importance of their presence here. The second, clearly surprised, notes that he expected a different attitude, believing that cute things do not arouse interest in the interlocutor. One of the assembled men calmly looks at the stage before him, his gaze directed at the girl standing next to his comrade. He sarcastically asks if young girls are always so small by nature, and how they can be so cleverly embarrassing. However, the purple-haired knight stops his abruptness, pointing out, "Don't be rude to the Lady Jaya." Lola, usually reserved and calm, stands next to two other knights, watching what is happening. His comrade, holding the red-haired knight by the neck, with undisguised mockery, says that today it was his turn to guard. He adds that this knight recently joined the order, and therefore he still has many shortcomings. The purple-haired knight looks sternly at the assembled group and warns, if the newly arrived knight starts behaving rudely, they should immediately report it to him. The girl answers with a smile that everything is clear, while the red-haired knight stands nearby, seemingly avoiding direct eye contact so as not to show his embarrassment. The red-headed man asks the leader, with a slight panic, if they don't trust him. Taking a step back, and visibly worried in response to this, the purple-haired knight calmly replies that Mr. Kian has the same opinion. There is tension in the room, despite the light tone of the phrase, and it feels like everyone here is keeping their emotions under control. The gentleman bowed along with the other knights before leaving, bidding farewell to the mistress. He was calm, but there was a certain tension in his voice, as he wished her a wonderful day under the protection of the veil. Only a slight echo of his footsteps remained in the room as he nodded respectfully once more in farewell. The Duchess looked at Sir Jay carefully, asking an unexpected question about his race. She could not help but notice that he was different from other people, and her intuition told her so. The man was slightly surprised by her observation, but smiled, acknowledging her insight. He did not expect such a keen attention to his nature, but was ready to answer. She stopped, looking forward thoughtfully, confidence growing inside her. Even if no one noticed, she felt that she knew the truth. The White Order was surrounded by secrets, and intuition told her that its members mostly belonged to another race. This is how the lady was able to understand the most important thing. She could not explain how she came to such a conclusion, but this feeling did not leave her alone. As is known, this race is stronger than humans. They are different in many ways. They easily manage even the most difficult tasks. Their natural strength causes envy, and that is why they are often disliked. Despite this, they continue to confidently do their work, as if not noticing the ill will of others. As is known, only in the north do they give preference to another race, different from humans in the distance. There is a majestic city surrounded by cold walls, as if a reminder of the strict traditions of the northern lands. People around are busy with their own affairs, but the atmosphere clearly emphasizes the difference in status and perception of this unusual race. Her thoughts were filled with strange guesses. Knights and another race. It reminded her of something, but the memories were slipping away. She lowered her gaze to the interlocutor, a little thoughtfully plunging into her thoughts. The knight interrupted her silence with a gentle reminder, addressing her to bring her out of her thoughts and return to reality. The boy knelt down in front of the girl, slightly squinting his eyes, as if asking a riddle. His face lit up with a sly smile. When he asked with a smile what kind of animal blood could be found in his veins, the girl hesitated a little, uncertainly, trying to understand whether she should guess, or this was another joke. A slight excitement was visible on her face, but she decided to answer. The red-haired man, in a burst of enthusiasm, leaned towards the girl and asked a mysterious question about what kind of animal's blood was flowing in his veins. The blonde tensed up, not knowing how to answer, because the answer obviously required a guess. Despite her doubts, her gaze showed interest, but also a bit of embarrassment. The scene was filled with light playfulness, creating an atmosphere of friendly challenge. A few days passed, and the atmosphere in the room became more homely and relaxed. A small group gathered on the carpet in front of the table. Jay, sitting on the floor with a slight smile, held several cards in his hands, offering them to choose from. He confidently looked at the girl who was watching him with genuine curiosity. The man holds the cards in his hands. His expression is full of excited anticipation. For some reason, he offers to make a choice, showing the cards to his interlocutor. She pulls out a card with a joker on it, and this causes her obvious confusion. The girl holds her head while the man begins to laugh, joking about the fact that her intuition always leads to choosing this card. The hero, clearly pleased with himself, laughingly points to winning the game, explaining that the victory was his, and therefore the heroine will not go to the Duke's room. The girl sits on the floor with a sad expression on her face, justifying herself by saying that she simply made a mistake. She is clearly upset by her failure, and cards are scattered around her, symbolizing an unsuccessful move. The situation evokes a slightly ironic atmosphere in everyone. Sitting in a chair with knitting in her hands, the maid calmly watches what is happening, barely holding back a slight smile. She reminds the heroine that it would be worth paying attention to strategic moves. As if the card game was a gambit in response, the heroine irritably asks not to laugh, assuring that this is not chess. The ironic remark of the maid only emphasizes her calm against the background of general merriment. The little heroine sat thoughtfully fiddling with her dress and wondering why she hadn't been able to get into her father's room for several days. Her large violet eyes were full of worry. Her recent attempts to get closer to the door had been unsuccessful, and something inside told her that the reason for this was much deeper than a simple lack of time. The guy in the blue uniform looking down says that the girl is not allowed to enter the Duke's room. His face maintains a neutral expression, but there is some severity in his tone. The Duchess, looking up at him in confusion, does not understand what is happening, and asks why she is forbidden. The young man, without changing his tone, calmly explains that this is an order from his lordship, adding weight to his words. Every day she tried to get into the room, but always met Aluan on her way. He always caught her before she could get closer. Despite this, the girl did not give up, and again tried to get around the knight. But none of her attempts were successful. After numerous failures, Jed offered her to play a game, hoping that it would amuse the little girl and dilute the atmosphere. The hero, trying to offer at least some kind of game to dispel boredom and distract from constant attempts to penetrate the Duke's room, offered a deal. If the girl wins at least once from him at cards, he will allow her to go there for a short time. She looked at him with apprehension, wondering what would happen if she lost. Jed smiled slyly, holding the cards in his hands as if anticipating a funny outcome. The girl, not losing hope of meeting the Duke, takes a decisive step. The conditions of the game are simple. If she loses, she will have to stop trying to see him. She boldly agrees, assuring that she will not lose. The man, squinting, slyly makes a deal, preparing for another game. At this moment, she begins to realize that this night is not as simple as he seems. The little girl stood there with a gloomy face full of regret and remorse. She remembered how Jed the Knight turned out to be a master at card games, and this fact upset her terribly, even though she made a mistake with the Winter Branch. But this game was too much for her. Her face turned red, and she clenched her fists, unable to withstand the emotions that rolled over her. The girl was on the verge of despair. Anger was building up inside. She was thinking about how her father had not answered her note, which tormented her even more. The heroine felt how the world around her was becoming dark and disturbing. Jed was standing nearby, watching her experience this moment. The girl's head was filled with the thought that she had already suffered enough, and this added even more pain to her. Solgren Jr. rushed forward resolutely, not wanting to wait any longer, and determined to see her father. Despite the obstacles, she no longer heard objections, only the noise in her ears and the beating of her own heart. Quickly walking along the corridor, she suddenly stopped, looking at the details. Déjà vu. It seems she had seen the hanging sleeve before, but she cannot remember when exactly. The Duchess, her eyes wide in surprise, took a step forward, holding onto the hem of her dress. An unexpected thought flashed through her mind that did not give her peace. She looked up and, a little confused, asked Jed if there was a knight in the order who had lost his left hand. This question came to her suddenly, as if there was some important solution in it. The friend, after thinking for a moment, ran his hand over his chin, trying to remember if there was anything similar, but his face remained puzzled. He replied that he did not remember a knight without a left hand, and also noted that it was difficult for a person without a hand to wield a sword, and that such cases were also not encountered among other races. The little heroine frowned, trying to remember details from the past. Her hands clenched into a lock, and her eyes showed alarm. She was sure that she had seen a knight without a left hand. But for some reason, the memories were blurred. Thoughts did not give her peace, and she quietly whispered to herself that she definitely remembered him, although now it seemed strange and inappropriate. The girl, slightly frowning, asks Jed what date it is. Today, he answers with a slight smile that today is the 30th, and tomorrow, the harsh winter month, will begin. The calm and confident tone softened her anxiety a little, but the approaching winter still brought with it a feeling of anxiety and expectation of something new and inevitable. A young aristocrat stands at the window, peering intently into the snowstorm beyond. She suddenly realizes that an important event must happen today, and not tomorrow. As she previously thought, she clearly remembers that a little boy loses his sister and left arm in a battle with monsters. This moment occurs before the rebirth that changed life forever. The girl, full of memories of the past, looked out the window, realizing the importance of this day. It was the day of Asaligo's arrival in their house, an event that changed many things. Her gaze was serious and full of emotions, while she, continuing her usual activities, asked Belgrin to bring warm boots, preparing for a possible meeting, or perhaps a new test. It remains to anxiously ask the maid if she wants to go outside, not hiding her anxiety. Lily resolutely confirms that she does, and hurries her, reminding her that there is little time. Then Jed intervenes imperiously, raising his voice, forbidding them to go out. The words sound stern and categorical, and the maid only freezes next to him, embarrassed and confused. The caregiver draws attention to the approaching snowstorm with concern. His voice sounds serious and insistent. He explains that the snowstorm is so strong that even people like the man will not be able to move normally on the street. His face expresses concern, and his gestures reinforce the feeling of impending danger that requires immediate action. The beauty looks at her mistress with concern, expressing concern for her safety. She asks how a little girl like her mistress could decide to go out in such weather. Her voice is filled with panic, and her face expresses anxiety. The lady tries to understand why her mistress needed to go out, asking first to explain the reason for such a hasty decision. The lady whispers excitedly. Her face expresses extreme concern. Her gaze is focused and filled with anxiety. She understands that time is running out, and every second counts. A thought flashes through her head. They are in danger. An unexpected situation requires immediate action, and she feels that she must act quickly to save those who need her help. Standing in front of Jed and Lily, the lady realizes that she made a mistake by expressing her concern too strongly when they ask who she meant. She presses her lips together, silently, scolding herself for her haste. The knight looks at her with slight surprise, while Belgrin is worried. The lady's head sounds like she was overexcited. The girl hesitated, trying to remember what she had just said. Thoughts about the victims were still spinning in her head, but she did not immediately understand the situation. Gradually, it dawned on her that she needed to act. The couple watched her determination to help with surprise, and the man in white noticed her impulse and noted that she was truly unusual. Lily tries to calm the Duchess down, pointing out that security measures have already been taken. She smiles reservedly, emphasizing that movement at the post has long been restricted. The guards are actively searching for victims. Security has been increased at the borders, and there are no unnecessary reasons for concern. The main character, with her head down, understands that the measures taken are not enough. Her gaze is directed into the distance, but disturbing thoughts do not leave her. The guards search only the surroundings of the posts and the lands that have been cleared. This makes her worry. She realizes that danger may still be lurking in other places. Jed looked at the blonde carefully, slightly frowning. Her offer to convey instructions to the guards to search more thoroughly caught him off guard. He tilted his head in slight bewilderment, trying to understand her motives. The girl looked determined, but when he asked why, she seemed thoughtful, as if she had to explain something obvious. Looking at the hero, the little girl can't control how her big purple eyes fill with anxiety. Her words sounded incoherent, but decisive. Something was bothering her. She didn't want anyone to get hurt, clenching her hands into fists. She tried to explain why it was bothering her so much, although she herself didn't fully understand what exactly was causing her this feeling of anxiety. He watches her, noticing how she suddenly loses her calm. Thoughts rush through his head. What could have alarmed her so much? At this time, the hero suggests using an owl to send a message, although he is not sure whether the bird will be able to cope with the bad weather. Nevertheless, he decides to try because the message needs to be sent to the nearest security post, despite all the obstacles. Beauty clenches her fist, clearly realizing her mistake. Thoughts of what she could have done differently do not leave her if she had known other ways to deal with the winter branch. Perhaps everything would have been different. Now this burden lies heavily on her shoulders, and she blames herself for not taking action earlier. She stood there, lost in thought, even though her heart was drawn to the street. Common sense told her that it was too dangerous to go out. Now the blizzard was getting worse, and the situation outside was only getting worse. She understood that an outburst of emotion could cost her too much, and now it was important to be careful despite the anxiety in her soul. The Duchess stood by the window, thinking about the lack of people in such weather. Jed could go and catch the demonic beasts himself, but even his efforts would not be enough. She was worried about whether they would be able to properly organize the search. In such bad weather, the lack of manpower at such a time created additional difficulties, and she was worried that everything would go wrong. In his past life, Asaligo was dying near a lake, and that moment remained in his memory, haunting his thoughts. Knights returning from their posts found him and others lying on the cold ground. The wind whistled in the night, snow flurries surrounded the scene, giving it an ominous and tragic tone. The light of the torch in the knight's hands only partially illuminated the dark picture of the past that would never let him go. There were no more free places in the hospitals, and Evan, realizing the complexity of the situation, decided to take responsibility. He brought the wounded children to the mansion to treat them himself, realizing that they would have a difficult and long path to overcome in order to survive. Clutching the fabric of her dress with excitement, the beauty realized that her fingers were shaking from the tension. Her thoughts were spinning around one idea. They should be close by now. Her heart was pounding loudly in her chest. Every moment of waiting seemed like an eternity. Her determination was growing stronger. With every second, she knew that she could not afford to be late if she wanted to help. The girl held the branch in her hands with difficulty, which seemed to her to be disproportionately heavy. She looked at it with bewilderment, wondering if this branch had a way to reduce its size, because it was almost impossible to carry it. Stubbornness was visible in her gaze, but also slight irritation that magic did not make the task easier. Memories of how she heard an unknown voice whispering that in order to use the branch, a certain door needed to be opened floated through her mind. This strange message made her think, because the meaning remained unclear. A slight anxiety filled her mind again, and she tried to remember more details about those events. The girl stands in front of a closed door, thinking hard that if she opens it, she can use a winter branch to stop the frost. Her gaze is focused, and determination is visible in her eyes. She clenches her fists, gathering her strength, and says to herself that she will try again. Inner excitement and readiness to act is reflected on her face despite her doubts. The man walks slowly along the snowy road, his feet sinking into the snow. He calls out to Kana, asking if she is sleeping, and urges her not to fall asleep, asking her to wake up. His steps are heavy but determined. He encourages her, saying that they are almost there and will soon be able to stop. The snowfall around seems endless, and the fight against fatigue is becoming more and more difficult. Through the howling snow, a light gradually appears before them. One of them points forward. A speaking voice sounds through the ice storm, promising that they are almost there. This place promised them shelter despite the fatigue, weakness, and cold. They tried to stay on their feet. The thought that these lands accept everyone, regardless of race, gave them hope. At that moment, Asserting looked ahead, unable to hold back his tears. His mother's words echoed in his head. They stayed with him forever. Her reminder was simple but filled with heaviness. To take care of his sister, even when she was no longer around, the boy's heart sank with fear and responsibility that he now carried, despite the fact that he was still a child. The boy ran through the snowstorm, barely keeping his balance on the slippery snow. The cold pierced his bones, but the thoughts that he had to protect his sister gave him strength. He was determined to get to a safe place where Kana could be protected. He just had to hold on a little longer, although the wind was getting stronger and the path was becoming more difficult. Through the howling snow, they appear creatures uttering menacing roars, like the stuff of nightmares. She presses herself closer, trying to protect those around her, their muscular bodies and red eyes gleaming in the moonlight, reflecting off the snowstorms. Fear grips her heart, but she holds on, sensing the danger coming. Asserting hugs his sister tightly, standing in the middle of a furious snowstorm. There is only one decision in his head. He must protect her at any cost. All his thoughts are focused on saving her from the threat. But suddenly, something incomprehensible unfolds before his eyes. He is puzzled, not understanding what happened. Bright, glowing butterflies are circling in front of him, surrounded by the gentle glow of dawn. The boy, with his eyes closed, realizes that he has died. His thoughts rush through his mind, leaving a feeling of strange calm. A stomping sound is heard next to him. He opens his eyes and sees the source of the sound, although he thinks it is a two-legged demon. Fatigue gives way to relief when the heroine says that he finally found them. The girl, surrounded by bright rays of light, looks at the stranger in surprise when he asks who she is. A small child with bright purple eyes looks at the hero with concern, illuminated by a soft light. Her voice sounds worried. Is she okay? Hoping that no one is hurt. The voice is full of delight when the little girl realizes that she has succeeded. The stick has noticeably grown. It's a little strange. Now she could do it herself. The voice remained in her head. It was quiet but full of confidence. She understood that this moment had come. She had to act. Her dress flutters softly. The white fabrics contrast with the darkness around her. and in her hand she holds a branch glowing with magic. The same stranger repeats confidently, "They have already spoken several times. It is time to stop being afraid." She thought listening to the very voice that always helped her, but now the heroine decides to ask a question. Who is this mysterious interlocutor, and how does he penetrate her mind, appearing precisely at such moments? The questions grow, but she is still ready to listen further. Ice patterns sparkled around her, reminding her of the power she had accidentally summoned. The subtle, almost fragile, yet so powerful connections to magic, now seeming obvious. The girl sits on the floor, surrounded by old books and manuscripts, leafing through the pages with interest. She wonders why the records say nothing about what she encountered. A strange voice responds to her thoughts, noting that he had never communicated with a person before and wonders how this could be in the records. The main character remembers being told that spirits are always friendly to people, but her recent experience makes her doubt this. This has never happened. In ancient times, the goddess Shea created spirits on earth, mysterious creatures to protect her land from demons born of darkness. These creatures became important guardians of balance and light. Spirits have the unique ability to enter into an agreement with a person, to help him in his needs and affairs. This union strengthens the connection between the worlds. The heroine is surprised she has never heard that the spirit of the Winter Branch can sign a contract with the Solgrins. She wonders why the spirit spoke to her. The little beauty does not understand what obate is, but an internal dialogue continues to sound in her head. With curiosity and caution, she suggests calling her interlocutor Winter, hoping that this will help establish contact with the spirit she just met. A mysterious voice warns Every of the power of names, acknowledging that the suggested name is appropriate, but advising her not to speak it, as names have far more power than she can imagine. The spirit explains to the girl that if she calls him Winter, he will take the corresponding form, but he warns that this is difficult to understand, and it is better not to try. The voice asked the girl what creature was the most fragile. She thought for a moment, and answered, "A butterfly." Her gaze was full of innocent curiosity. The stranger thought that such a name was good. The girl slightly squeezed her hand, as if at that moment she felt something important, as if the name opened something new for her. The voice gently asked her to open her eyes, assuring her that it had found a suitable form for her. The main character narrowed her eyes clearly, not expecting such words, but curiosity flashed in her gaze. A butterfly, shrouded in a bright glow, hovers before the girl, delighted by her beauty. The beauty tremblingly calls her Lady Winter, but the spirit protests, reminding, "From now on, call me as you thought up." The blonde's voice sounds apologetic for addressing him incorrectly, and she asks why he felt cold when she appeared, feeling that it was unnatural and that it gave her a strange feeling. The branch emitting a cold glow, the stranger explains to her that her body feels discomfort because it has a limit that it can withstand the embodiment of the butterfly's power. The girl looked tensely at the glowing butterfly. In her thoughts, there was only one desire: to stop the storm and save people she knew, that for this she needed help. The heroine extended her hand, inviting the girl to follow her. The time had come to fulfill her wish, which would remain quite simple. Smiling with relief, the Duchess felt glad that she had made it in time. The sun's rays illuminated her face, reflecting a feeling of gratitude and lightness. The young man looks at his new acquaintance with confusion, realizing that her skin is cold as ice. Panic arises in his head. How to cope with this surprise and help two people at once when they are in such a state? The sun's rays softly illuminated the snow-covered fields. People walked ahead carrying the last supplies. In the distance, a woman exclaimed that there were still children left here, besides the lady. The young man looks at the girl, barely containing his embarrassment, hugging her to himself. The realization comes that she is an aristocrat, and thanks to her, they are both still alive. The doctor, with towels in his hands, bows his head and answers the question of when the Duke will appear. Lily says that Hervin will soon be informed of what happened, and he will arrive. The heroine lies on the bed, covered with a checkered blanket, shivering from the cold. She struggles with all her might against fatigue, feeling that now it is several times harder for her than after the battle. The Duchess still does not get up, trying to convince herself that everything is fine. Despite the cold and weakness, she is proud that she saved others with the power of the Winter Branch. A confident inner voice sounds emphasizing the importance of care and protection. The patron reminds of his responsibility, promising to properly protect his ward. The stranger sounds with a hint of regret, claiming that it is not an illness. But alas, it is impossible to destroy the shell, the girl asks in bewilderment, if the interlocutor knows anything about her father's illness. A man with a worried expression on his face orders Evan to move the heater closer to the bed, while an exhausted girl lies next to him needing warmth. Solgren Sr. looked at him with a worried look, ordering hot water to be brought urgently. There was an insistence in his voice. There was no time for delay. The girl recalled her father's words, warning her not to use the winter branch, and a feeling of guilt settled in her heart because she had disobeyed and was now worried about his condition. Looking with a drop of concern, the hero assures that he has collected all the heaters of the castle and it will soon get warmer. The girl, tired, slept quietly. Her face expressed peace. The little girl in his arms realized that she had to apologize to her father. Her face showed deep regret. Meanwhile, someone nearby notices that her body temperature is gradually decreasing, which is an alarming sign. The man holds his daughter tightly in his arms. Her face has turned slightly pale. He asks to bring more wood for the fireplace. The servant promises to fill her with warm water, caring about her well-being. With anxiety in his eyes, the hero prays that his actions will work. He is tense. Beads of sweat on his face reflect his inner excitement and hope for a positive outcome. The main character tries to keep herself in hand despite the icy cold that penetrates her body. She does not want to worry those around her, but her thoughts about the fear of frostbite do not give her peace. Lost in thought, Solgren imagines warm milk and fresh-baked goods that make her smile. The fire in the fireplace flared up, creating a bright flame that filled the room with warmth. The joy and relief from the warmth instantly reflected in the atmosphere. The man sighs in relief as he hugs the girl wrapped in a soft blanket, the warmth returning, and he notices with gratitude that the temperature in the room is starting to rise. The doctor expresses calm and looks at the device in his hands. He announces that the lady's temperature has finally returned to normal, and now she can relax. Solgren looked at the servant and maid, carefully noting their work with appreciation. He said that they had done a good job, but now he wanted to hear what had happened. The maid reported that the little girl suddenly asked to go outside. She explained that she wanted to save people who had suffered as a result of the storm, feeling a duty to them. Evan and Lily stand by the bed, watching the girl's condition, saying that she was saved. They share a little relief, but are ready to tell about what happened. The lady again expressed a desire to go outside. The servants hurried after finding the children by the lake. But soon the lady suddenly lost consciousness, which caused alarm. The character asks a question with caution, suspecting something strange. He does not understand how the lady found out about the children at the lake and why the weather suddenly improved dramatically. The man looks forward with a serious expression. He explains that in order to use the winter branch, one must properly handle the magic by opening the door, and this is difficult. One has to reflect on the incredible abilities of the maiden, marveling at how she was able to open the door at such a young age. Belgren bows her head, regretting her mistake, and admitting her guilt for not taking good care of her mistress. She asks to accept any punishment, humbly awaiting her master's decision. The character reflects that if he had been healthy, Uriel would not have grabbed the winter branch and would not have committed such rash acts. His thoughts are full of regret and anxiety. The man asks his interlocutor, with slight anxiety about the fate of the children, that every saved, his face expresses concern. He tries to understand the consequences of what happened. The interlocutor explains that both rescued people are in serious condition, but will soon recover. They are a brother and sister of a different race, and the rest of the circumstances will be revealed by Kian. The man stands thoughtfully, holding his hand, pondering recent events, his gaze thoughtful. He remarks out loud that the rescued children seem to be purebred, purebloods, those who are born with the blood of the strongest beasts, retaining human form. They are now extremely rare, almost disappearing from human memory. Kian looked at his interlocutor thoughtfully, asking whether Every knew in advance that the children needed help. This strange guest did not give him peace. The man, squinting, asks whether Every could have accidentally used the power of the winter branch. The girl sleeps soundly, unaware of the conversation around her. The Duke says seriously that they can go in his hands is a letter signed by Every, which adds tension to the air. It is not clear what could be there. He sat with the letter in his hands, but was in no hurry to open it. Fear was taking hold of him, because he was afraid that he would no longer be able to remain cool after learning the truth. Looking out the window, sitting with his back to the bed, feeling the cold calm of the room, thoughts consuming him, she did not mention that her presence was important to him. He stood with his head down, unable to find answers to the questions that tormented him, quietly uttered his friend's name, asking for advice. It was not clear what he should do now. Sitting on the bed next to Evriel, the man knew that he couldn't be with her. It seemed right, and yet the question swirled in his head. Was he wrong? To hide from the Emperor, the Duke lived for several years hiding in the shadows, and soon decided to distance himself from the girl, breaking all ties, believing that this way he could protect her. The character thoughtfully recalls the last time he spoke of his love for her, with flowers depicted in the background, symbolizing bright and warm memories. A man in a strict black outfit looks with concern at his interlocutor, who stands with his back to him. He asks if everything is okay, and receives the answer that the sedative from the doctor really worked. The medicine that the blonde takes, although it alleviates the attacks, worsens the condition of his body, creating dangerous consequences for the whole body. The protagonist did everything possible to get rid of the symptoms, but the medicine turned out to be too strong. Now his body is shaken by convulsions, literally after every time. Rasher stood to the side, addressing the boy in front of him with respect. His words clear and calm. Despite the underlying anxiety, the room was silent. The boy sat alone in the dark, and then lay down next to his daughter, thinking that he would stay with her only for this day. His gaze was directed towards Every, because now she needed his care. Lying quietly next to the girl and feeling how calmness slowly took over his body, the man realized that even if someone called him a coward, he didn't care. The main thing was that Every was safe. Solgren lay there trying to cope with the impenetrable cold, her body tensing, using all her remaining strength to warm herself up, and she sighed heavily in exhaustion. Evriel slowly wakes up and tries to get up, but notices a familiar face in front of her. A thought flashes through her head. It's her father in front of her, and surprise is replaced by slight confusion. The beauty lies next to her father, under a soft blanket, her thoughts wandering. She feels that she has spent too much energy, but surprisingly quickly came to her senses after that. The Duke and the maiden lie side by side. Ivry is lost in her memories. The day when she last saw him screaming at the door comes to mind. The baby is really happy and hugs her father. While he is fast asleep, she decides to enjoy the moment, snuggling up to him, because soon he may wake up, and the moment will be interrupted. Also, without getting out of bed, the lady thinks that she would like to spend more time with the one she misses so much. She doesn't have enough time together. The Duke sat up abruptly as he woke up, alarm instantly taking over his face. When he saw that Every had woken up, his voice trembled, full of relief and excitement. The man tried to convince himself and others that everything was okay, but his gaze remained tired. Remembering Evan's words, he thought about the possibility of a rise in temperature. Every clenched her fists, holding back tears, and screamed piercingly that she was guilty. Her face was burning with excitement, and her gaze was full of sincere remorse, because she did not want to ruin anything. The girl still blames herself, saying that everything that happened is her fault. She now understands why she was forbidden to use the power of the Winter Branch, realizing all its danger. Solgren sits on the bed, sincerely promising not to use the Winter Branch anymore, and assures that he will use it only in case of extreme necessity when he grows up. Every lowers her head, shyly, her gaze full of regret. Her father's voice sounds soft and soothing. Looking up, she hears that no one is going to scold her, which is even a little strange. The hero looks at her with a warm smile. His voice full of gratitude. She saved the children from the storm. Her actions gave them life, and he is grateful for her heroism. The man sat on the edge of the bed, holding the girl's hand. The daughter, worried, asked if the children were alive. Hearing that Evan helped them, she breathed a sigh of relief. Solgren stands by the window, looking thoughtfully into the distance. Uttering quiet words, he thinks that it would be nice to find a magic teacher for protection. Every clenched her hand into a fist. Her thoughts were full of bewilderment. How was this even possible? The guy was saying that a situation might arise where she would have to defend herself. Every hesitated, slightly agitated by the question. The man seemed to think that she didn't like this idea, the girl muttered embarrassedly, and hastened to thank him, afraid of seeming ungrateful. Standing in front of her father, the lady meets his stern but caring gaze, reminding her that she cannot hide problems when there are people nearby who are ready to help. The main character, clearly frightened by the unexpected punishment, could not hide her surprise. She is forbidden to leave the house for a week, and she must take care of her health. The man, leaning thoughtfully on his arm, sums up their conversation, his voice calm as he says that they will end here, as if he is closing the subject with relief. The little girl stands in front of him, her face expressing confusion and slight panic. He asks her to go back to her room, but she doesn't want to because she hasn't seen him for so long. Suddenly, falling back onto the bed, the little girl screams, clutching her leg, which suddenly hurts her face, filled with panic. She exclaims that she will not be able to go further, although in fact this is not true. Evri complains sheepishly that she is rocked in the arms of the maid who holds her with a caring smile, and Hervin asks in surprise if she doesn't like being with her. The child throws herself on her father's bed, exclaiming that it is much more comfortable than her own, and convinced that resting here will help her recover faster, she decides to stay. Rasher respectfully reports the visit of a stranger from Campa. He hurries to convey the news, not knowing how it will affect further events in the house. Evri stands sighing happily against the backdrop of bright flowers, her eyes shining because Sildia has finally arrived, and this long-awaited event brings relief and joy. A girl in glasses sits at a table thoughtfully holding a cup, her face expressing impatience, her thoughts overflowing with the question, how much longer should she wait before she is called? The interlocutor is surprised by the unexpected visit, not expecting a personal meeting, but only a letter. She asks if there were any problems along the way. Sildia greets her interlocutor with a bow, introducing herself as Sandfield, and wishing her a good day under the protection of the veil. Sildia sits at the table, asking why such a young girl invited her to a meeting, expressing obvious curiosity and bewilderment. The woman tensed slightly as she chose her words. She had important information to convey before the conversation could continue. The girl could believe what she heard, thinking about what was happening. Her thoughts were full of doubts after hearing about how the teacher forbade the student to take on orders. Sildia Sandfield is a mysterious artist who became famous for one painting. Her art captivated everyone with its mysterious blue hue, arousing interest. The girl looked ahead with a thoughtful gaze, wondering what kind of person that man was. He liked to drink and play. The Duchess looks thoughtfully at her interlocutor and asks a question about her debut, clearly pondering an important decision. The girl slightly doubts and hesitantly asks whether she is suitable for this task. The blonde calmly answers that she wants to entrust this matter to her. Evriel holds a cup, her voice calm, asking to paint a landscape with the blue pigment she gave him. Confidently promising to find everything necessary for the project, the little girl says that she is ready to pay any price. Her plans are to open a business and introduce a new shade to society. Sildia firmly states that she will do her best and asks to trust her in this matter, her eyes full of determination and readiness to cope with the task. The artist adjusted his glasses, thought for a moment, and quietly asked if it was possible to add one condition to the contract. His tone of voice was cautious, but there was something else burning in his eyes. A calm voice said, "Can I draw your portrait?" Her eyes lit up with curiosity and slight tension, because it was not a big request. The main character looked thoughtfully into the distance, remembering the past. Her portraits had already been painted in the imperial palace, in her past life. It would be nice to agree. Evri agrees to the offer, with a smile, while gently adding that she will fulfill the request if she is helped in return. The little girl sits lost in her thoughts. Despite the joy of signing the contract, she is sad because she had to leave her father's room. The heroine sits on the sofa, worried, doubting whether he received her letter and followed his father's recommendations. Asking in surprise how they managed to make and send the pigment Belgrin, then asks how they know the apprentice. Kian politely asks to spare him a few minutes to tell him the important news. The Duchess is glad of his arrival and invites him in. The man, with a serious expression on his face, asks Mrs. Belgrin to leave them for a moment, hinting at an important conversation. The white-haired girl and her companion watch the Duke's assistant closely, one of them quietly noting that the man looks a little nervous, creating a slight tension in the air. The man speaks thoughtfully about the mixed-up documents found in the office on the day of Mr. Ross's visit, hinting at a possible connection between the events. The girl asks a question in fear, assuming that a thief has broken into the office, but she is gently objected to, saying that she cannot be called a thief. The main character looks away attentively. Her thoughts are anxious. She remembers how she put the documents in their places and understands that someone is checking her reaction. The little heroine, feigning innocence, says that she does not understand what is being said, hoping to avoid suspicion, her expression completely serene. The character holds up the hair he found and says in an accusatory voice, "Now you're going to continue to deny your involvement?" She presses her lips together, smiling nervously, and the thought flashes through her head that she should have pulled out all her hair so as not to get caught. The conversation between the two about how smart their mistress is respectful. She even understands chess terms like gambit, which is strange since there is no chess set in the room. The knight thoughtfully recalls how strangely she behaved. She rushed to the window and suddenly ran to save the victims. Rasher looks closely suspiciously, noticing that the order to expand the search was clearly not accidental, and asks for details. The man ordered to tell everything, starting with what happened with the finances and their lands, and also about the governess. The most important thing is how the little girl found out where these children would be, and also why she invited an unknown artist. The beauty may simply cry, but Sylvia will not start a business without her, and therefore it will not be possible to disown her. Keon is the one who controls everything in this estate. The land can only be restored with his help. The heroine is determined to try to enlist support. Her gaze is full of confidence. She is going to ask something. The beauty smiles cheerfully, speaking sarcastically about where the money received in advance was spent. "We are talking about the salary." Keon listens. It seems the little girl found some documents about salary payments. The girl sits on the floor with a book in her hands. She notices that she often receives payment in advance. The heroine thought that the guy's hard work was poorly paid, but he gets a significant amount, even too much. The girl with a thoughtful look smiles knowingly, wondering if she can guess the reason for Rasher's actions. When the knights first came to the Duchess, they called Kian Lord, which seemed strange since he had no title. It is clear that the knights belong to a different race. Perhaps Rasher buys people from other clans. Kian tells the heroine, with a slight smile, that she has changed, confirming the purchase of friends from the market with the money he received. The heroine looks into the distance, thinking about how the man spends his money on helping others, which surprises her. Young Solgren announces her proposal with a smile, and the young man asks with interest what exactly as he wants to know. The girl smiles slyly, offering to earn more money, confidently, stating that she can solve the problem of the debt to Ross. The heroine makes a gesture with 2 fingers, confidently listing the conditions. No questions asked, and keeping it a secret from her father. Rasher sits quietly explaining that his new duty is to be the Duke's secret assistant, but insists on keeping the deal quiet. Evriel doubts whether Kian will accept her offer. The guy calmly agrees, stating that he accepts her conditions. Kian understands that if he doesn't stop the lady, it's better to be nearby and watch her actions, anticipating possible problems. The hero warns that if he is asked directly, he will have to answer all the questions. The girl, smiling, agrees easily, as if it is not a problem. The hero says that he is leaving, having advised her to think in advance what to answer Mrs. Belgren. The maiden sitting on the floor energetically agrees, confirming his words. The guy standing in front of the Duchess asks a direct question, wondering what she would do if he refused. The girl looks up at him in surprise, listening attentively. Rasher says with a serious look that he could report everything to the Duke. The girl smiles and slightly coquettishly asks if she would threaten him in that case. The servant, with a slight smile on his face, reveals the truth. The hair he found was just bait to lure the beauty out. With a serious expression on her face, the girl demands answers, placing her hands on her hips, her voice determined. The blonde excitedly presses her hand to her face, remembering that the Winter Branch told her about this. She used the name. The maid explains to her charge that the artifact is part of the ancient spirit of winter, which surprises her. The girl admits that she named the branch Mrs. Butterfly because she couldn't use her real name to avoid giving her away. The beauty, confused, asks to explain again, admitting that she did not understand what was being discussed. Evriel admits, with a slight smile, that he speaks in such a way on purpose so that no one understands anything. A little girl asks in surprise if she can talk to the spirit called Butterfly. The heroine thought, admitting that she did not know the answer. Her thoughts return to her father's illness, which she was thinking about. The girl turns to Mrs. Butterfly with excitement, hoping to get an answer to her question, which disappeared into thin air. Sir Alon asks, with slight surprise, what happened when he heard a sound at the door he came to see. The kitten sits comfortably on the lap, making meowing sounds, causing affection in those around him. He was brought by a knight. The baby runs down the hallway, obviously frozen, trying to find somewhere warm while people talk about something else. The girl explains with a smile that they got the cat because of a mouse invasion, because she herself was scared of a mouse and needed help. Dark memories came flooding back as the main character sat in the closet where she had once been locked with a dead mouse. The baby cried and knocked on the door all night, but it was only in the morning that the maid discovered her. The Duchess recalls how she became a replacement for the Empress's deceased daughters, receiving all her attention. When the Queen rejected the Crown Prince, he began to torment her, and this was shown in a look full of hatred. The maid leans towards her mistress in surprise, noticing how she was looking thoughtfully at the cat. She obviously liked him. The girl gently strokes the animal, saying with a soft smile that he is very affectionate and trusting that he suits her that way. Solgren smiles as she holds the kitten in her arms. She says pleasantly, "My name is Ivriel, and you?" The blonde looks at the kitten and notices that he doesn't have a tag. She thinks that he hasn't been given a name yet. The girl with white hair holds the kitten in her arms and with a soft smile says that she is glad to meet him, calling him Ruby, after which he lights up scarlet. Mr. Rasher greets Mrs. Belgren politely. They exchange formal words. She carries milk. The man asks in surprise about the kitten, and Lily reminds him of its purpose, catching mice, and that he got it himself. Belgren turns his head and wonders thoughtfully where this cat came from. When Uriel gave the kitten a name, it suddenly began to glow, showing that it was no ordinary animal. The girl looks at the kitten, feeling an unusual connection, something similar to what she had with Winterbranch. The beauty is confused, not believing that she was able to make a contract with the spirit so easily. The main character recounts with surprise how the cat lit up and flew after he received a name. The conversation about spirits continues. The blonde reminds that she already has a spirit named Butterfly. The girl looked thoughtfully at the cat. The Winterbranch did not answer her call, and now she needed to find out more about what was happening. Solgren wondered if there were any books about spirits, and her hunch led her to the Winter Library. The Duchess tugs doubtfully at the man's sleeve, insisting that he did not act of his own free will. The knight explains that they were not there that day because they were fighting demons. The girl, looking thoughtful, says that she heard about Jed's punishment. But rules are rules. The knight says with a slight smile that he is glad because he was worried that the girl did not like the brunette. They laugh while discussing their arguments with the guy. The girl clarifies that she doesn't hate him. The Solgren's mansion has a winter and a summer library, but since winter lasts more than half the year, the winter one is used more often. The blonde had never been to any such place before, so she was very surprised. The baby, of course, almost gave away her identity. No one knows about her reincarnation in this life. She behaves differently. Opening the huge door to enter the luxurious hall, Belgren assures that the child will like everything. Since the librarian is not around, the woman asks to look around while she goes to look for him. Addressing the kitten, Solgren asks if this is his first time here, and it turns out that it is. The girl's mother liked this place. The Duchess constantly used this library. The woman often sat on the southern side, most often on the windowsill, basking in the sun's rays. Evriel stands lost in thoughts about her mother. Belgren told her about what the girl was interested in. The little girl looks at the sofa, lost in memories of how she used to sometimes fall asleep on it. Uriel looks at the sleeping girl with ash-blonde hair, and a thought arises in her head. Is this really Asaligo's sister? The knight coldly demands respect from the Duchess. The girl calls him in despair, but he does not hear. The boy looks on in confusion as his hand suddenly touches hers, and he asks in fear what is happening, not understanding the actions of his interlocutor. The girl asks in surprise if she got too carried away, grabbing the stranger's hands, and embarrassedly apologizes. Asiligo stands there embarrassed, and Lily, with a smile, suggests that he address her informally. Belgren introduces Asiligo and his sister Canna. The girl watches with interest, holding tightly to her brother. Blue Eyes explains that the children will live at the estate until they recover, while they live in the guest house. Every stands with a kitten on her shoulder. She is the only daughter of Duke Solgren, who saved them that day. The beauty anxiously justifies herself, asking for forgiveness. She blames herself for her harsh behavior with the children who almost died. Smiling, the girl agrees that it is time to return. Lily calmly replies, "Yes, madam." The boy stands with his eyes downcast and quietly says words of gratitude that are sincere. Lost in thought, the heroine remembers how in this life, Asiligo did not speak to her so quickly for the first time, which is strange. Then the man suddenly asked a question that disturbed her thoughts, alas. But it still did not become clear why it happened. She stood there stunned by his question, not knowing what to answer. But something inside her changed. Kana looked at the Duchess with delight, admiring her beauty, as if she saw a living doll. She was glad that she met such a person. Asiligo gently stroked his sister's head, warning her against judging people by their appearance. The boy froze when he heard the girl's question about the Duchess's beauty. He clearly didn't know how to answer. The future knight thought about the Duchess. The little girl was clearly different from all the aristocrats he had met. The gray-haired man clenched his teeth, thinking he couldn't allow himself to trust just because of the kindness shown. She lay on her stomach, thinking about what she had read and recited aloud, the terms of the contract written on the pieces of paper. There are only 3 important things that need to be done in order to get the conclusion. The baby lay there smiling, realizing that she had fulfilled all the terms of the contract without even realizing it. The maid suggested telling the news to the Duke. He would surely be delighted when he found out everything. The girl in the bright dress cheerfully agrees to go to her father, and Lily, who is also getting ready to go there, watches her. Belgrin is confused as she notices the girl looking upset, realizing that the news didn't make her feel impressed. It makes me sad, because it's clear that even good news can't soften someone's heart. Solgren shouts in rage that he will no longer obey his father, expressing his protest. The maid suggests coming back and trying to talk to him tomorrow, reassuring the girl. Sildia proudly tells the woman that she has finished her painting, waiting for a reaction. The heroine proudly called her Painting Solgren's Dawn. She thought that this title would be appropriate. The girl with shining eyes happily declares that her friend's painting will become a world masterpiece. It was enough just to see it. The heroine asks Lily to convey an important message to Keanu, saying that she has urgent business with him. A friend of the teacher Sandfield reports that the painting was hung in the Riviera, standing in a relaxed pose, discussing the details. The man exclaims in irritation that the woman disappeared so that the paintings could be put on display. The hero is clearly outraged that the painting was hung without the teacher's permission. This is unforgivable. An irritated man pushing his way through the crowd shouts for everyone to move away. He is worried about what kind of scenery they are looking at. The soft blue color and the beautiful castle clearly go together. It's strange that it's so beautiful. The man with the letter smiles, thinking that, as the lady had expected, everyone is interested in paint. Solgren's Dawn has made a splash and will be shown in Campa. It's time to move forward. The character is pleased to report that the painting has become famous and that the paint can now be sold. The girl happily offers to come up with a name for the ink, emphasizing the importance of the symbolic word. A friend suggests that Sandfield come up with a name for the paint herself, and she asks in surprise if she can on. The woman reminds that without her painting, the paint would not be noticed, so she must give it a name. In her mind, the beauty thinks that the name will again become Phantom Blue, because it suits. The words come out on their own, Fairy Tale Blue. This time, it's something different. Kian smiles. The name is strategically appropriate, so there is no argument. All that remains is to choose the location of the store, but the little girl doesn't have enough budget to open one. Lily is surprised and cautiously asks how her interlocutor could have learned about this fact. The little girl happily remembers that she learned this information in a past life. The girl speaks sadly about her parents, who run a small workshop in Campa. The Duchess asks in surprise why she was not told about this before, and the answer even confuses her a little. The man calmly says that the plan is still being developed, and that the conversation ends there. Kian thought thoughtfully that his master was always dissatisfied whether his daughter came or not. The hero read the letter, thinking that she always came, but recently began to avoid. They discussed her disappearance, One said that she spends a lot of time in her room, so everything is fine. The guy asks something, but it seems nothing can be heard. He bows his head in a gesture. Kian looked thoughtfully into the distance, as he was informed that the jurisdiction was demanding an explanation for the weakening of the frost. He stared away, thinking about how he was using his illness to stall for time, knowing that the silence couldn't go on forever. It seems that the easing of the cold has attracted more visitors to their lands. It is only a matter of time before Every becomes the center of attention. Everything has already reached the Emperor, because he always watches the family more than anyone else. The pale man can barely contain himself, asking Kian to spread the rumor that he is dying. Hervin is in a panic, his gaze full of tension. He is sure that he must appear weak only in this way. Will he be able to protect his daughter? The guy tilted his head thoughtfully. He orders to quickly spread rumors, it will help. The protagonist closed his eyes with a heavy sigh, thinking about his fate. Of course Solgren knows that he doesn't have long left. Spring arrives with an uninvited guest, which gives a slight premonition of impending changes. Ross, arriving to ask for his money back, looks as usual not too friendly. It becomes clear that the Duke is not going to repay the debt, because Kian standing next to him is smiling.